actually kill these people that are on TV too, like journalists and like news people. And they're like, yeah, this is just the beginning.
The FBI doesn't have a good public perception right now.
We haven't since Comey.
January 6th, a lot of people say there were a lot of agent provocateurs. Do you believe that?
I would find that hard to believe. I wasn't there. I did infiltrate militia groups who were there, and the Outlaws. I was in for a year and a half, and then they brought me down into the basement of the clubhouse and stripped me at gunpoint looking for a wire. I was wired to the hill, and they missed it.
The division that's being caused. It does seem like there is some type of movement that is not open in public, but it is open because we can see it happening.
It is a fact that our adversaries overseas, they do put money into the states, and not just on white supremacy side. They do it on the far left side because they want chaos. I don't care which belief system you got, it's just evil.
Yes. Scott Payne, welcome
Yes,
to
sir.
the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Retired undercover FBI agent. Overall, great dude. We have a lot of mutual friends as well.
Yes.
John T.
Yep.
Glenn Jacobs,
Yes,
Richie
sir.
Walls, that whole crew. So I appreciate them introducing us, and looking forward to this podcast.
Yeah, me too.
So you were an undercover FBI agent. How long were you in the FBI for?
I was in the FBI for 23 years, but I was I usually term it as I was a real cop first in South Carolina. 5 years, so 3 as a uniform patrol, but 2 as a vice and narcotics investigator. So on a street level, I was already starting to do undercover work, making street buys and stuff like that. So that's when I started really getting the undercover bug. And then I got hired by the FBI, and as soon as I could get into the program, or you try to get into the program, it's a tough program to get into. The certification process is pretty gruesome. Some say it's the hardest thing to get certified in than the FBI. I'll put HRT, hostage rescue team, above it because that's more physical. But
Yeah. So where were you a street cop at first?
Greenville, South Carolina.
Greenville, South Carolina. And you went to the FBI, and we'll go through like a timeline of everything. I think that'd be interesting.
Sure.
To kind of go through your career and talk about the different cases, because you got some pretty famous cases you worked on.
Yeah.
So you get into the FBI wanting to be an undercover FBI agent.
Yes.
Once you got in, what was the process, and where did you go?
So when I got hired by the FBI, you're going through the academy, and you got 56 field offices. You don't know where you're going to go. You can list them, but you'll sweat and lose sleep, and you go back and change it. It really doesn't matter. I mean, just let me tell you my top 10. If I'm not going to get them, send me where you want to send me. But I got New York City.
Oh, wow.
So here I am, a country boy out of South Carolina, and my first office is New York City. I was actually still assigned to New York when 9/11 happened. It's just that that day that it happened, I was in San Antonio undercover, San Antonio, Texas undercover. So you get there. I ended up as a case agent, going to the Colombian drug squad. And you're a brand new agent in New York City. They're huge cases. I was at the bottom of the rung. You're still learning how to be an agent. And then amazingly, after about 3 years in New York City, I got a transfer to the San Antonio division because of undercover work I was doing. And after I finished that undercover, I went to the border of Mexico. So I was stationed in McAllen, Texas for 6.5 years.
Oh, wow.
Working the border. And then they came out with a policy that said, and it's still the current policy for transfers, if you are in a hard to staff office for 5 or more years, and it's not that McAllen is a hard ship, it's just it's hard to staff because you're on the border. If you've done 5 or more, you name which field office you want to go to, and you trump everybody. So by the time that policy came out, I'd already had 6.5 years in, and I named East Tennessee.
Oh, nice.
So
you go into New York. Like, what's the first, let's say, intense undercover situation that you were in?
So I wasn't certified yet as an undercover, but you can do like cameos. And because of my background as a vice and narcotics investigator, I'm with NYPD. Back then they had like 42,000 officers. So we would go, and it might be something like, there's nothing really intensive. There was some intense stuff when I was in South Carolina buying dope and stuff. But in New York, I just did a couple of cameos where maybe we've intercepted a 5,000 pounds of weed, which back then was a big illegal thing, 98, right? And then we replicate that, how it's supposed to be delivered. Say it gets popped in LA, then we replicate that shipment I mean, everything, tape, everything. And depending on which United States attorney, assistant United States attorney you're working with, they want different things to get the prosecution. So we rigged the box up. So once we delivered it to the Jamaican gang, when they popped the lid, it notified us and we went in and arrested everybody. So it wasn't a lot of stuff in New York, except for I landed the gig in San Antonio. It's a classified case. It's like the only classified case I ever did an undercover on. It's been outed, but I don't want to be called back and put on the box.
No, that's okay. Yeah. You went to McAllen though after, and that's on the border. So you're dealing with the cartels. You're dealing with a lot of all the trafficking stuff. What was that like?
Great. I mean, if you love working, you know, I don't want to say great because there was bad things, but it was a great community. Like all the law enforcement community, or all our wives. I mean, like we were joking because like all of our wives were pregnant at the same time. We would all go meet our wives for lunch. We would have like weekend get-togethers, but it's a very close-knit, tight community. But I got there in 2001, and shortly after, 9/11, right? They started creating, or they I can't remember when they created the Joint Terrorism Task Force. I think it was before. Yeah, it was definitely before 9/11, but after 9/11, they were cranking everything to it. So the flavor of the month down there was special interest alien smuggling. And you're starting to hear that more on the news now. Again, it kind of surprised me they haven't changed the name because the government's notorious for that. But special interest alien smuggling would be people coming into the United States illegally, but they're coming from threat countries. So China, or, back then, maybe even Yemen, Al-Qaeda, radical Muslim, something like that. At one point, they even had Brazil listed, not because Brazil was known for having terrorists, but they were known to have camps that were helping terrorists get westernized and come in. So that's what we were working. So all I did as a guy that worked drugs pretty much my entire career, I went to all my contacts at Border Patrol and stuff and said, hey, we're changing the focus. We're looking for this. And we started catching loads and following loads and getting a lot of intel. But my squad worked violent crime and gangs as well. So we had kidnappings and extortions, 3-4 a week.
What's it like? You go into a situation, you're undercover. You're with murderers, people that, if they understood what you were, they would kill you probably right there.
Probably, yeah. Depending on the people.
Depending on the people. How do you stay calm in that situation and kind of in character?
That's a good question, because in my younger days, I was way more brash and way more dumb, So you're more of that. You're still a type A personality. I'm still a type A personality, but me and my peers, we kind of figure, let's say you're a seasoned undercover. You look at a group and you go, you're not going in there to do that undercover because it's too dangerous. But us in our own head, we'll go, but I'm going to because I can do this. So as far as the stuff I did on the border as an undercover was like in there on the border, I just pretended to be a truck driver, stuff like that, delivering illegal aliens into a motel that was stashing them or something like that. But while I was now as a case agent, they go hand in hand with me. Like I'm developing sources. A source is doing what I do as an undercover. It's just that they're not a bonded law enforcement officer. They probably have a felony on their record, but they're the ones going in and recording and getting evidence for us. I will say that back then, Oziel Cardenas was the head of the Gulf Cartel. So there was some kind of like SOP. There was like a standard, if they kidnap somebody, they're calling and extorting the family, they want money. We try to start working with them, and essentially we broker a deal to where usually we're handing over a vehicle with so many miles on it, worth so much money, with as much money as the family could come up with to send the person back across. I will say that after the Department of Justice took off OZL, it created this gap in Mexico and the Gulf especially, to where people are now vying for that. They want to run it. Mm-hmm. Like the Zetas were the enforcement arm for the cartel. They did all the kidnapping. They collected all the quotas. They did the torture and all that stuff. Well, once OZL was taken off, they're like, well, we should be running this show. And then Sinaloa cartel's like, we're coming in and taking over. And MS-13's like, we're taking over. And then the Mexican military's like, no, we are. And And my understanding after I left is the deals where we were like fighting to get somebody released before their phone died. Now they're just cutting people's heads off.
Wow.
They don't even care.
So what's, when you're in that situation though, and you're dealing with the cartels,
Yes.
very, very dangerous people, not an appreciation for life. Like,
Correct.
the mindset, like what are you thinking? Are you fully in character, or are you, knowing that you're still Scott and
Yeah.
you've got to act like Bob?
So for me, and we teach this as well, or I still do in the trainings I put on now, I try to be as close to me as I can, because that's me.
Right.
Right. If I may or may not be married, I may or may not have kids, I may or may not be a musician and a singer, but you can bet I probably lift weights and I ride a motorcycle every now and then, so I try to stay towards that. I will say for me personally, if I was doing anything to where, let's say it's like a murder for hire type deal, or you're dealing with somebody that stone cold where you're not trying to build a rapport and be buddies, that's where I would change my personality the most, because I'm generally a happy-go-lucky guy, jovial, love connecting with people of all sizes, shapes, colors, educational level, monetary level, doesn't matter to me. But yeah, so if you're dealing with, I didn't deal with the cartel so much undercover as I did as a case agent, but when you're dealing with those types of people, you just got to be on your P's and Q's.
Yeah.
You gotta, I mentioned this earlier, but you have to be able to see if a situation is deteriorating, and it could start deteriorating very quickly, as an undercover. And you can have as many cover teams as you want watching you, but the real deal is if it's going to hit the fan, there could be 3 SWAT teams outside that door. I can show you so many tactical videos where they're on the other side of the door, bad guy comes in, it's a rip, he turns, he gets 8 shots off before they can even get through the door.
Wow.
So I'm not trying to scare you or scare, people doing undercover, but usually we know. It's just kind of, you're on your own to a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so you're in McAllen. Are you going over the border back and forth?
It's no. I mean, you can, but I'll give you an example. I've got mentors of mine who have now retired, and they did undercovers in Miami, like early 90s, late 80s. They were hopping on cigarette boats and going right over to Cuba and going, you cannot do that now.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much red tape, and headquarters would shut it down, and probably rightfully so.
Right.
Who's your cover team? But, yeah, it was case agent wise. Like I said, the undercover stuff I did there, my main undercover I was doing during the time in McAllen is when I went in the Outlaws. But so I wasn't undercover in McAllen, but I was undercover in Massachusetts, so I would fly.
I see.
So that's kind of how it worked for me on the border.
And so, what year did you join the Outlaws?
That would have been somewhere around like 2005 to 2007 and 8.
Okay. So between 2005, 2007, 8, you join. What's that process? How does that happen?
Well, I'll tell you, join is probably not the correct word, because a lot of your normal MO is you hang out, you become a probate. If you make it through probation, you get your cut. On that particular case we were working, and don't get me wrong, I would have loved to have a cut.
What is a cut?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm talking as if everybody knows the 1%er biker world, or just the biker world. That's your leather vest.
Okay.
So like if you're the Outlaws have their leather cut, and their mascot is the cross pistons with the skull, and the skull is Charlie. And then there's history always going way back. But what we did as a team is, and again, I would have loved to have a cut, but over the last 30, 40 years, there are so many law enforcement officers that have infiltrated biker gangs and gotten the cut, but the case didn't go well, or maybe they lost themselves, or just there's so many variables, especially when you're dealing with violent people that can turn like that. It's just, I thought around 2006-ish, I'm like, man, I'm not even in the middle of my career yet, and I'm already doing one of these cases. I mean, I want to have like 4 of these done, you know? And what I found as the years went on is the stars really have to align to be deep undercover in a violent group where things could just happen. Somebody gets murdered. Somebody finds out the source is a source and they beat them up, or you just something happens to where even the FBI is like, we're out. We're closing this case. We're not doing it. And that's kind of what started happening over the years. Several of them I started again, but for whatever reason, that worked really well in the Outlaws. And what I did is I hung out. I let them kind of see me, get myself known, and then I never joined. They asked me to join, but I never joined because I was portraying a high-ranking member of an international theft ring. So anything that was stolen, me and my truckers were moving it to McAllen in the border, which I knew all about, you know, because they did. They would bring stuff down and trade it for dope, trade guns for dope with the cartel and vice versa. And then you always had some, not all, but you always, there was always an element of corruption around the border, whether it be a small town police department with only 4 people, you know, and then, you know, you're only making $15,000 to $20,000 a year. And the cartel says, hey, I'll give you 10 to 15 grand, anywhere from 5 to 15 grand for you to just turn your head for 3 minutes and let me drive through. Yeah. That's sometimes that's hard to go up against.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like what, when you start though, like you walk in the bar, the biker club, like what's the, who makes the connection? Not necessarily the person's name, but like, how do you even go about doing something like that?
Well, what you hope for is that your case team has great intelligence. So if you're coming in as an undercover, hopefully they've already been on these people long enough to say, hey, that guy right there, he is an attention, you know, hoe. He's got to have attention. He loves to be surrounded by big guys. That's good stuff to know. Because back then I was running about 6'4", 280 whatever pounds. And of course, in Massachusetts, as soon as I open my mouth with this accent, people are like, where are you from? You know? So you can use that. I use that to my advantage. And what I did is I was at the bar they usually hang out at. And then I just kind of got to know people and do my thing. And then the night they came in, now, you know, who the hell's that guy? Well, that's Tex. He comes up here all the time. And then things start happening. And, you know, somebody yells something at you, you send a drink back and forth. And then next thing you know, you're invited to the Northeast Regional, you know, meetup. And you go into a sea of black leather and testosterone, and everybody's looking at you like, who the hell are you? And the more people you meet, the more scrutinized you are. And yeah, so that's kind of how I did it. Almost like a hanger. That's what they would call that, a hang around.
Yeah.
But then somewhere in all that, and again, they have to be predicated. So you got to realize in the undercover world, the evidence is usually so overwhelming. I'm telling you, 99.9% of the people I've ever been on undercover against, they all plead guilty. Because the only thing they can really do, the defense can really do, is either claim entrapment or try to make you look like a bad person on the stand. So
you kind of infiltrate them in a way. You're on the phone. Hey, John, you want to go hang out? Let's go grab a beer. And then you start making deals. How does that work?
So that's what I was trying to get to. I go off on tangents. I apologize, but they have to be predicated, right? Like if we have no evidence that you've ever dealt dope or nothing, like I can't come up and start talking. I mean, that's that we can start getting into entrapment issues there, you know.
Interesting.
So hey, you're broke, and I'm offering you 30 grand to move this kilo. Well, I kind of entrapped you there, right? So a lot of these members were already predicated on dope deals and stuff and arrests that they'd seen there. But really there wasn't a whole lot I had to wait for, because as soon as I said I was from McAllen, Texas, the president of that chapter said, how much can you get a kilo for? And can you bring me one? And I'm like, well, that was fast.
Yeah.
So as time went on in that case, you know, they start finding out that I actually do some illegal stuff too, you know, and then they start seeing some things I do, whether it's, you know, a truckload. And it all started with them. They were doing insurance scams where they would report their motorcycle or car stolen, sell it to me for a price. They don't know what I'm getting for it in Mexico.
Right.
And then I supposedly take the vehicles all down to Mexico, and they get their insurance money. And then it started like that. But once we started gaining trust with people, next thing you know, there's a legit carjacking, which is a pretty serious crime.
Yeah.
And they need to get rid of that vehicle that was carjacked. But it has, it wasn't OnStar back then. I think it was called LoJack or something like that way back then, right? And they're like, hey, this thing's got a tracker on it. Well, don't worry about it. You know, we got this. And then you start gaining more trust. And then there was a time where a Hell's Angel president was shot and killed in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And another Hell's Angel was with him, and he got shot, but he didn't die. And he was able to say, hey, it was a green pickup truck with Florida plates. Well, we knew that Florida members were up, you know, and then I'm on the phone with them while the case team in Boston is running a wiretap, which is not like TV. You can't just call and say, I want to tap this phone. That is not how it works. It's like 80-page affidavits. It's got to get all kinds of levels of approval. Every 15 days you have to do updates. It's only good for 30 days, and you're always starting back over. But they're running that, and we're calling and try to find out, hey, what can I find out? And they're like, hey, you might want to stay out. It's pretty hot right now. I'm like, if I come in, can you hook me up with a vest and stuff? Because I don't want to be flying on a plane with that. And you just keep gaining more trust. And eventually we led to the point to where, again, predicated. But we led to a point where we did a drug protection. We had 40 kilos of cocaine, real, 1,000 pounds of weed, and they met other undercovers, and because the whole thing was the president especially wanted a pipeline into a drug supply. His math and business skills were not that great because he's thinking that if a kilo in Deep South Texas costs $13,000, he thinks he can pay me $13,000 for that kilo. And I'm like, why do you think the kilos up here cost around 25 to 30 grand? I go, it's because you got to bring it from Texas. You're not getting it for 13.
Right.
But that's what we did. Everybody wanted to take the case RICO. If you would have done a RICO prosecution for that case after the 2 years that I was undercover and probably the 3+ they worked on it, we could have wrapped in a lot more members from Florida all the way up, but it just didn't. It didn't go that way with the United States Attorney's Office.
Yeah, I remember the Outlaws. There was an MMA fight in California that I was supposed to be at. I ended up not being there. And one of the Outlaws, I had met the guy in, I think, Ohio at another fight. He was a really nice guy, fighter. Yep. I liked him. And he met my mom, and he was very nice. He was a very nice guy. And he was fighting in California, and he was getting beat up. And the Outlaws ended up starting a fight in the audience, and like people were stabbed, and it was a big thing. I'm not sure if someone was killed, but may have been. It's been 20 years.
Yeah.
But that was my first experience with.
It could go violent real fast.
Yeah.
Like the great people, I'm hanging out. I made a lot of friendships.
Yeah.
And they were, I mean, other than they didn't know they were making friends with an undercover FBI agent, but it was pretty much me, you know. And there were some friendships that were pretty serious and deep, you know, during that 2 years. But again, you could be out. It reminds me of being out with some of the white supremacists that are just, you know, you're hanging out 1 minute, and the next minute, bam, you just turn bad. Matter of fact, up in the Northeast, there was a gang called FSU, stands for fuck shit up. All they did was go to bars and fight. Their whole thing was fighting.
Really?
A lot of them were outlaws.
Really?
Yeah, there was a crossover. So you never know. Like they'd go to let's say it's a metal thing or like a, you know, some kind of mosh pit type thing.
Yeah.
Well, they'd go in there and they'd send somebody small in or somebody that's not as intimidating and start the fight. And then when the other people start fighting that one, I mean, there's videos of it. I mean, it's just, you don't even realize that everybody on the wall is all FSU. And they come in and just start smashing.
What's the point? Just to fight people?
I guess, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So like, talk about the friendship thing. Because, you know, if you're going undercover, and I'm guessing, you know, you might like somebody. Like, he's a good dude. I mean, he's doing all this bad shit, but he's still a good dude. Yeah. You know, like, what is that like in your mind? Do you ever feel bad or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. You yourself, personally, you've got to figure out how you're going to rationalize it in your mind so it doesn't have a negative impact on your psyche, right? But especially, the outlaw case is probably out of all the ones I've done, and it's not like I've done, let me say this right here and right now. I have mentors, I have peers, I have people I've mentored. There are guys and gals out there that have done way more than me. And they've gone through more harrowing stuff than me. And they're not on here for whatever reason. So, but I always want to pay respect and then, just know it's coming from a humble place.
Sure.
But tell me again.
I was saying, what's it like with the friendship?
The friendship. Yeah. So on that 2-year case, there was one guy in particular, and his name was Scott, and he wasn't a patch member either, but everybody in the Outlaws respected him, and he had some working ties with mafia stuff too. But he and I just bonded. We were like they say, man, it's cliche, right? 2 peas in a pod. It's just like, man, we would finish each other's sentences, work out together, drink together. Even got to the point where you're not going to put him in the operations plan for the FBI, but like people would be like, hey, is Scott going to be out there with you tonight? And I'd go, yeah. And then everybody would go, okay, cool. Because they knew he would fight for me and take a bullet for me and vice versa, really. But this is in the book. And when I go teach the law enforcement stuff, I do a block surrounding this time, because what ended up happening is I found my threshold over a 3-year period. I worked myself too hard, and for me, I met my threshold. I stopped taking care of myself, and I crashed. But during this case, he and I really, we bonded, and it's again, you see it. We get trained in it. You should know better, but I was treated better by the Outlaws than the FBI a lot of times. I had my first or second shoulder surgery at that time. The day of my surgery, I had 5 messages from one of the case team members, and they knew I was in surgery. They were just like, hey, when you get this, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. And I'm like, what the, And what I'm getting on the Nextel, because Nextels were big back then, I get, hey, brother, I'm just checking on you. How's things going? How's your shoulder? I love you, brother. I love you too. And you're like, it's not like I'm going to turn bad and go to the dark side against the FBI, but yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
And then as the years went on in other cases, some I never really liked anybody, but I had to usually, especially if it's going to go long term, for me, I have to bond with somebody.
Sure.
And I saw one. I did one in Tennessee for 1.5 years, and that was a full-time one. And probably about 5 or so years ago, everybody pled guilty on that. I think we arrested like 52 people. But somebody sent me an obituary, and it was the main guy I'd infiltrated, man. And it, you see it, and it's like, oh man, it's just a somber feeling, because you spend time with them. But again, you have to know. There's several things you can do, but you can break this down. You need somebody. You need an accountability buddy. We call them contact agents, but you need somebody who's watching over you for the whole purpose of your psyche. That's it. They're not connected to the case, because you'll get that stereotypical, which has happened for many, many moons, where say it's a smaller department or whatever, you got one person undercover, their contact agent is also the case agent, which is also the person that's going to benefit from this case. So all they want is for you to succeed no matter what. They're not looking out for your best interest. And you being a type A, we're not going to stop.
Right.
I'm not going to stop. Same with a lot of your military friends and stuff. And my friends, same thing. Tactical guys, we're going in. I'm not stopping. Yeah. And if you apply that warrior mentality type thinking, if you apply that to everything in your life, it can be detrimental. So you definitely make friendships, and you just have to know, where that line is. And maybe let's just say for the outlaw thing, we're getting ready to do that 40 kilo, 1,000-pound deal. And this guy who told me he has 4 daughters, he almost went to jail. Looking at serious time, he got out of it. He's not doing this stuff anymore. Wanted in. And maybe, it's not like I'm saying, hey, I'm FBI, or I'm saying, you don't do this, you're not doing this. No, but because that would be wrong. I'd be overstepping my bounds. But I can look at you and go, why are you doing this?
Right.
Why are you? You told me you got 4 daughters. What are you doing? You don't have to do this for our friendship. That's all I'm telling you. Yeah. No, I'm in. Okay.
Gotcha. Did you ever have somebody that wanted to do something and you said, hey, you shouldn't do this, and they didn't do it? They ever take your advice?
Well, I've slowed people down. That was the white supremacy, one of the white supremacy cases. They're ready to go kill somebody like that week. If we wouldn't have found out that they were planning a murder plot, I literally would have showed up to a campsite and I would have found out right then, hey, leave your cell phones. We're all getting ready to go murder somebody, which is going to be like, okay, I'm not leaving my cell phone. Do we blow the whole case right now? How do we do this? Is the team coming in? So yeah, but I'm trying to think like on a personal level.
Yeah, I find it very interesting, like the personal level, because to me, human connection is the most important thing. And whether if someone's there's a lot of reasonably good people that are doing bad things. And so I could imagine probably the hardest part for me would be caring for someone and knowing that, you're undercover, you've got your job, they're doing something very illegal and they need to be held responsible, but also like wanting the best for them overall too. So that's got to be a hard thing for the psyche.
Love a success story. And as a law enforcement officer, pretty much my entire career, when I sit somebody down at the table, I tell them, with the exception of maybe a pedophile, but I'll tell them, I go, hey, I'm not saying I think you're a bad person. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying I disagree with what you did. What I'm saying is you're an adult and you made a choice to commit a crime and now you're caught. So let's just start here. I do that all the time. And I'll tell people, I'm like, man, matter of fact, there's one now that I'm retired that I helped get arrested who was a white supremacist. He's now flipped. I made sure it was okay with the assistant United States attorney and the United States attorney's office, but I did a letter on behalf of his character for his sentencing. And because I said, man, as long as you're doing the right thing, I'll do anything I can to help you, you know? And there's very few things in law enforcement career that I've loved more than a success story from somebody learning from their mistakes, turning their life around for the better, you know? And now this one particular guy, he was worried about having a felony on his record trying to get a job. I said, well, who better to be your somebody that they can call than the guy who helped get you arrested, right? You know? If you're doing the right thing. But yeah, and I'll tell them, I'll go, look at me. I am not a cookie cutter FBI guy.
Right.
I had tattoos when I came in. Hoover would have never hired me, you know? But, and I committed all kinds of crimes growing up. I just didn't get caught.
Right.
Well, there was a funny moment at the sheriff's office when I got hired at. They had this sheet, and it basically said something to the effect of, circle any of the following crimes you've ever committed, even if you never were caught. Well, I was just being honest. I mean, I circled public indecency, DUI, malicious damage, petty larceny. I mean, I was circling all kinds of stuff. And they were like, are you serious? And I'd go, yeah. And I told them all the stories. And I don't know, maybe they thought it was good that I was being honest, but, you know.
They let you through.
So, yeah, so I can connect with, again, and, you know, you look at your family and this, that, and the other. It's, I try to, unless it's time to be unrespected, you know, like if they've done something like that, but I try to be respectful. And, you know, going through this book writing process, I never coined it this way, but my friends who are my literary agents, they termed it this way. They said, you know, you refuse to dehumanize people. And I was like, you know what, that's a great way to say it, because say you're writing a book and then the co-writer's like, these stupid idiots and blah, blah, blah. And I read it and I go, no, take the stupid idiot part out. And they're like, what? I mean, and I go, they're people too.
Yeah.
That's somebody's dad, somebody's son, somebody's husband, whatever, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting part, because I don't think people think about the mental impact it has for the undercover agents. That, you know, you're people too. You have this human connection that goes beyond a criminal and a cop. It's more of human being to human being.
Yep.
And it's got to play with your emotions in a way.
The more time you spend with them and living with them, and street level stuff, man, I'm going to pop into your house, I'm going to make a buy and leave. I don't have to get super connected with you. 3 buys, we're hitting you with the search warrant, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, long term, or, I mean, look, a lot of your cases, a lot of your undercovers, it might take 6 months just to get everything set up, to start getting to know people. And some of your cases, we have enough predication to open the case. It goes through legal review and everything, but we're not positive, especially on the white supremacy realm, right? Or even the militia realm, because it's your First Amendment right. There could be thousands and thousands of people on this Telegram, you know, Wire, whatever, Gab, whatever. They can spew all kinds of hate. They can say, I hate every black person, I hate every brown person, I want them all to die. That's not illegal. So we might be infiltrating them because there's been a lot of rhetoric and people are saying, hey, you need to look at this. But I might be in there for 4 months and find out, look, this just talk. They're not going to go do anything. But that whole time you're building relationships, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it can be very tricky. I've just always stayed close to who I am because the way I was taught, and I agree with this, is if you pretend to be something completely opposite of what you are for a long period of time, one or two things is going to happen. You're either going to become it or you're going to slip up and get caught. So I've always just tried to be close to who I am, which is why I probably never got called for a Wall Street gig or the, if there's 5-star hotels and more, I don't know. I was always in the backwoods.
That's awesome. You got your book coming out in March of 2025, Pale Horse. What are some of the stories? Well, just talk about the book, actually. What's it about and what was the goal of it?
Well,
what is the goal of it, I guess?
Well, the goal, first of all, I never wanted to do it. All I ever wanted to do when I retired, because, and you've met some mutual friends, it started with Glenn, because I've been around wrestling my whole life. I've known the head of security for WWE. I take church kids and stuff backstage, stuff like that. But when Glenn was running for mayor, I met John T. And then after that, John T gets Richie and they start going in. And you know how it is. It's like, hey, man, you got some good stories. Let me introduce you to this person. And then by the time the Rolling Stones article came out, we started getting hit by everybody. All the big, companies, Leonardo DiCaprio, Scarlett Johansson, Amblin Entertainment, Steve Spielberg, all this stuff. And that's when the literary agents were calling Rolling Stone. And I'm like, I don't want to do a book. I mean, the way I saw it is I don't want to go around every town and they convinced me, look, man, this is your legacy for your family. You can tell your stories. And the way I saw it is I was like, look, I'm basically doing what I already do. I go around and I teach and I speak at conferences and wherever, even through the FBI, over the attrition. You've taught in front of thousands upon thousands of officers, hundreds and hundreds of civilians, because we have outreach, Citizens Academy. But when I got on the phone with them, it was basically, I'm just going to keep telling my stories, and there's going to be a co-writer, and we're going to put it to paper. And it turns out that they'd also done some books of some of my mentors who were retired FBI and had bestseller books and stuff. So I called them to make sure, and we decided to do it. But as we're doing it, I'm just telling my stories, right? And then you start. I'll tell you what happened for me. I won't say you start, but what happened for me is my eyes just started getting more open. Like, instead of being brash and going, somebody coming up who may not understand our side of the world, and they ask some questions that I may think are completely idiotic, with our military friends and the tactical people, we're like, what? You have no idea what evil's out here. Like Mexico, you mentioned, it's a different value of life. People just don't understand that.
Right.
But the old Scott would have been like, you're an idiot. You need to go back home and live in your bubble and be happy we're out here on the wall. Not to get all, Jack Nicholson on you, but be happy we're out here. Yeah. And I started realizing I didn't really do a whole lot of good. And you get involved with these huge groups like Eradicate Hate. And I'm like, well, let me just listen. And as we said before, how do you bring people back towards the middle?
Right.
This whole, in my opinion, if you're far right, you're not smart. If you're far left, you're not smart. It's just too much hate.
Yes.
Let's bring everybody back together. Again, like I made the joke, like, hey, it's okay for you to like something I don't. It's okay for me to like something you don't. We can still be friends.
Right.
Do you eat? Do you like food? Me too. So let's start there. We got something in common. But the book, what it covers is, it's just like chapter 1's a synopsis of me growing up, some funny stories about my family in high school, and looking back, it was really the first undercover I ever did, but I didn't realize I was undercover at the time,
Yes.
Not in law enforcement, but in high school.
Right.
Trying to find out who had damaged the vice principal's house and spray painted it with a bunch of, racist stuff and whatnot. And then chapter 2 is me as a cop becoming a vice narcotics investigator. Some pretty scary things at street level deals. 3 and on is all FBI undercover. Because what I didn't like, I've read a lot of books from retired agents and undercovers. And if you're saying that the book's undercover and it's about undercover and it takes you to chapter 10 to start talking about undercover, well, what are we doing?
Right. Or
in the middle, I throw in one of my case agents, because I've been blessed to be on some big cases or running some big investigations that had great impacts in wherever we were at. But as we started getting more and more into the book, I was getting asked what you just asked me. What is the goal of the book? What are you trying to say with the book? And I'm like, I'm just telling my stories. And then after, again, getting involved with so many people that eradicate hate and these wonderful people who have gone through some horrific things from extremism, lost family members, the Tree of Life massacre, the Buffalo massacre, all these things, it just started hitting me. I'm like, man, this is cliche. And does it make it sound like I'm too soft? Because no, I'm not too soft, but it's like, man, look, stop hating.
Yeah.
Hate takes so much energy.
Yes.
And it's not rewarding hardly ever, if ever, and it takes a lot of energy and it just drains you. But if you spread love, it's almost instantly gratifying.
Yeah.
And we're going to put it in the book, but there was a quote from Martin Luther King that just ran true. And I'll probably butcher it a little bit because I don't have it in front of me. But it says something to the effect of, hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. I think I said it backwards, but that's kind of the message. And you're like, okay, yeah, let's just bring people. You get on these phones, and I teach a whole block on radicalization of teens online. Now, I have personal experience because I've infiltrated the white supremacy side and the militia side, but I have peers or mentors or people I've mentored that have infiltrated the radical Muslim side or whatever. It's all, you get on and you start diving into those rabbit holes on your phone late at night. And I think as humans, most of us want to belong to something. You want to fit, you have that need to belong. And it goes back to the 80s gangs or cults. They're going to find somebody, maybe from a broken home. You don't have a lot of friends. Maybe you're a social outcast. Maybe you can't find a partner. Maybe you've been bullied. Those were the ones I kept running into. I know there's all kinds of other avenues, but those are the ones I kept running into that would find this extremist hate, and now they can bond with something else. I mean, look at what, it's escaping my mind right now, what they're incels. Have you heard of those?
What is that?
So incels are basically white supremacists, but incel is short for involuntarily celibate. So here's the belief system. The shooter at the Aurora movie theater, he was an incel.
Okay.
They were really concerned about, a lot of people were concerned about the movie The Joker because, with Joaquin Phoenix, because that character itself painted what kind of like an incel is. So they cannot score, basically, to break it down in simple terms. They can't hook up.
Yeah. They physically can, but they choose not to.
Well, they try to get a girlfriend and nobody wants to date them.
I see. Okay.
Right?
Yep.
Or a partner, but it's usually girlfriend. And then they take that and turn the hate even more. So now they're involuntarily celibate. Not voluntary, involuntarily celibate. So now they hate the women. And they push this ideology to where, well, we're going to kill all women. Which still leaves you not hooking up. I'm like, how don't, what do you?
There's a group of people that believe that.
Yeah. Incels. I'm sorry, incels.
Wow.
And in some of the groups I was in that were white supremacy, a couple of them weren't too far from being incels.
What are the conversations with them like? I mean, they're just mad and angry and just deep-rooted hate, obviously.
They talk rape a lot.
They want to rape people?
Well, they can't
Yeah.
have sexual intercourse any other way.
That's wild.
I'm trying to not just say get laid.
No, it's
but,
okay. Yeah.
They can't get laid, right?
So they talk rape. So they have this hate for women.
Yeah.
And it's all the woman's fault.
Yep.
And they don't look at themselves and say, oh, well, maybe, if I were
Not my fault.
Yeah. It's a victim. They're playing a victim.
Yeah. A professional victim. Yep. So.
Wow. Do you just want to beat them up all the time?
Well,
like I would. If I saw them in public, I'd be like, let's fight.
The old Scott, yes. Yeah, 15, 20 years ago.
We're spreading love now, but I'm just saying, I still might want to beat these guys up.
I'm gonna spread love in the way of punching and slapping.
That's right.
I'm gonna slap the love into you.
Right.
But yeah, so one of the white supremacy groups I was in, which was the main thing for the article, which is also the bookends of the book, right? The reason it's called, and again, I don't get to pick everything. We put it on the table. You've got these brainiacs that look at algorithms and all for titles, but code name Pale Horse. Pale Horse was my moniker in the violent white supremacy group called The Base.
Okay.
So it kind of starts with that because that's what really the Rolling Stones article was about. Yeah. It starts with that. It did get a lot of coverage all over the world. because there was members from all over the world. And it starts with that, and then it ends with that. Kind of like, how did I become Pale Horse? And that's the journey of the book.
And so the base, how did that it start that you infiltrated, them?
So that would be kind of a typical deal in law enforcement, especially on the domestic terrorism side, right? Like I told you earlier, there can be thousands of people in there spewing hate. How do we watch them all? How do we know which one's going to go and do a lone wolf thing? We don't. Nobody has a crystal ball.
Yeah.
So we might proactively go after them. And we were getting reports from overseas, our world working partners saying, hey, we've got these people over here that are members of the base. Looks like they're kind of in the United States. And the team picked me. I mean, I was kind of on the team too, but I was like, I'm willing to do it. No better than anybody else, There's plenty of people in that chain that could have done it, but we all know each other, right? Because it's like, if you have, not to get off on a tangent, but let's just say in the FBI, you've got 600 certified undercover agents. Well, when you ask how many of you have been the primary undercover on an undercover operation, it dwindles down. And you say, how many of you been the primary undercover on more than one, but less than 5? It dwindles down even more. When you say over 5 or over 10, you're down to like a core, probably 30 to 50 people, and we all know each other. So I would get a lead on something or a white supremacy case or something, and I'd be like, hey, I can't do it. I just had my text group. Hey, no need to respond. If you're not available, we got a hot one, Colorado Springs, blah, blah, blah. If you're available, hit me back. And then we would work it that way. So with that one, I went on, they were posting all over Gab, which was an app. And it's kind of like a bunch of posting pictures and stuff, kind of Facebookish, but not really, because it had different groups. I mean, they literally had 14 words as a group. Well, that's the 14 words that is renowned in white supremacy. It's David Lane coined it. I'll butcher it, but it's something that we must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children kind of thing. That's the 14 words. And then they had whites only, a group like that. So you go in, you can see them posting about training and stuff, and I started responding. Next thing you know, I start getting emails, and I'm being asked all kinds of questions, and I'm answering those questions. And after about a week of back and forth questions, I was told to download the app Wire, let them know when I got it, set up the account, and then in Wire you can do voice to voice as well as posting and stuff. So something like a Snapchat kind of thing. And I went through about an hour and 15-minute interview with like a 5-person panel asking me, and I could hear some of them were young, and I could hear some of them were older. And I passed. I passed their sniff test. And 24 hours later, they said, hey, we'd like to have you in the base if you'd be willing to be a member. And I said, absolutely. And then they said, where are you located? I said, East Tennessee. And they said, we'll get a leader of the cell closest to you and you'll be contacted. They set themselves up. I never was able to confirm if the leader purposely, because he denied it, but Al-Qaeda in English is the base.
Interesting.
And they set themselves up just like Al-Qaeda. They wanted 3 to 5 man cells, CELLS, with my redneck accent. I don't know if it's coming across different, but cells all over the world for that call and what they called Boogaloo, which would be D-Day, which would mean the collapse of society. And the big thing with this group is, and again, I'll go out and speak and teach on white nationalism from the KKK days all the way up to right now. And this is not the KKK. This is not burning crosses and you go and do a march. They are accelerationists. James Mason is a longtime white supremacist. He created Adam Waffen Division. He did the book called Siege. And a lot of it is guerrilla warfare type tactics, a lot of accelerationism, and the base was huge into that siege culture is what they called it. So essentially it means this. They don't believe that there's a political solution to save the white race. They believe that society is either going to collapse on its own or from man-made events, and they want to speed it up. Like one of the members who's now serving a lot more time in jail than he was because he did some heinous things once he got in jail after we arrested him and picked up a lot more charges and years. He told me, he goes, hey, I voted for Hillary Clinton. Now here I am with a bunch of white supremacists, and I'm like, why? He said, because if she came in, he said they would start taking money away from police. The military wouldn't get as much. There's going to be riots. There's going to be, in his mind, if he voted her in, it would speed up the collapse of society.
And so they're worried about saving the white race. That's their
Yes.
What's the what's their philosophy on that?
It always ends up. Excuse me. I'm gonna make that chair squeak. It always ends up, or I'll just say, most of the time it ends up in them having their own ethno-state. Does that mean the entire United States is white? No. There were groups. The group I was in, the cells I was in, was looking at setting up a compound, basically an ethno-state in the Appalachian Mountains. We had a group in the base that were looking at the Upper Peninsula in Michigan. We had a group that were looking at the Pacific Northwest. But essentially, it would be a compound, and you would have your own schooling and training, and I don't know. There's not a lot of, I guess you could say, forethought and afterthought, right? There's not a lot because, huge neo-Nazi, huge Hitler, which always kind of amused me because I've done a lot of stuff around the far left and socialist and stuff like that. But I've had good friends that they're more set to do those undercovers while I'm over here with the other people doing what I do, or we did. But if you start up here and you've got far left socialists and you got far right socialists, and they go down, they meet right back. They want the same thing. They want everything paid for. They want this, that, and the other. And I would ask them, we'd be on a 5-hour hike or something, and I'd be like, "So we're neo-Nazis, yeah, yes. So we're accelerationists, yes. So who's going to be Hitler?" And they all kind of look at each other, and I said, "Well, only one of us can be Hitler. There can't be like 5 Hitlers. Who's going to be the leader when all this baby goes down?" So it's just things to think about.
Yeah.
But for me, it's amusing because I'm just kind of like, I'm trying to,
Throw little
point out
jabs
to them.
in.
Yeah, point out to them. I mean, some of these kids believe that the Earth is flat. Some of these kids believe that the Earth is concave. They believe hugely in a hollow Earth and that Hitler's still alive, living in the middle of the Earth with Agarthans, and there was some other name with like giant people. And I started, we'd be drinking, and I'd kind of just poke at them. I'd be like, "Really? 15 foot tall?" They're like, "Yeah." And I go, "Well, what are they waiting on? Why are they still down there?"
Right.
Yeah, I know, right? But to tie it back into incels, later on in the undercover investigation, I'm like, I know ethno-state. I know we're going to set up our own thing. We're going to run this baby. It's going to be ours. The white race is going to prevail. We always do. Kind of thing. I'm doing my part. And I said, "But I haven't heard any of you guys talking about how we're going to procreate." I said, "Because I got a lady, but she's not for share." And they started giggling a little bit, and we're talking 20-year-olds and older, like, "Well, we're just going to rape the women." And I'm like, "Okay." And I look at the one dude who's got a girlfriend, and we kind of smirk at each other, and I said, they go, "What's so funny?" I said, "You guys don't have a lot of experience with women, do you?"
Yeah. There you go.
And they're like, "What do you mean?" And I go, "I'm saying it might work for a little while, but at some point you're going to have to go to sleep. And you might wake up missing parts you went to bed with,
Yeah, exactly.
I said, I'd give that whole rape thing another thought,
Yeah.
But again, they've probably dove down some deep, dark hole and black metal and whatever. And a lot of Satanism, not knocking Satanists. It's not my belief system, but a lot of that, you start diving into those accelerationist groups, usually somewhere in there will be somebody that's messing around with Order of Nine Angles, which is another huge white supremacy group, but really satanic.
Really?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you hear a lot of different things in the media. To me, and you can correct me here, I feel like they throw the title white supremacist around a lot when a lot of it isn't. How many actual white supremacists do you think there are in the United States? And do you agree that they actually throw the title around sometimes when it's not?
Oh, I believe they throw it around way too much. But that kind of goes with this whole cancel culture and woke culture stuff, It's hard to disagree with anybody on anything now without being, or just not even disagreeing, just having your own opinion, some free thinking, right? That you've talked about, right? Free thinking. Absolutely. And then all of a sudden everybody's like, "Whoa, I'm like, hey, back off, man." But yeah, I think it's thrown around a lot. But I mean, if you're a certain media outlet and you are catering or bantering for the type of people you want watching you're going to say certain things, and that's same on the opposite side, right? Sure. But let's take, for instance, January 6th. I can't tell you how many calls I've been on, not just how many times I've heard it on social media or mainstream media or just TV in general, on calls where I'm being, like they're pitching us, right? Hey, we would like to do a TV show, a documentary kind of thing. And they're just saying it was all white supremacists on January 6th. I go, no, that was militia. That's anti-government. That's 3%ers. And again, let me paint a picture for you. 3%ers aren't illegal. 3%ers, like there are militia groups. It's in the Constitution. And where we're at in Tennessee, man, you see 3%er stickers everywhere. You see the Gadsden flag on license plates. It doesn't mean they're white supremacists. It doesn't mean they're super anti-government. It just a lot of times it just means they love the Constitution and they love their guns, and usually they love God. And they're not saying they're going to do anything unless cops stop arresting people, unless you have to take care of your own, unless somebody comes and try to take their guns.
Yeah.
You know? I think it gets thrown around a good bit, but it's due to lack of knowledge. Because every time I've been on a call, whether it's a far left person or whatever, they just don't know.
Right.
So you spread that knowledge. It's just like me talking to somebody and them saying, and by the way, this was at Eradicate Hate with a very highly successful, well-known defense attorney. And they said, well, I just don't understand why they couldn't have just shot that guy in the leg. And I looked at her and I said, I said, in all your years, do you not know what the force continuum is for deadly force? And they're like, well, no, what are you talking about? And I'm like, well, you don't just pull a weapon out and point it at somebody unless it's a deadly force situation. And I had to explain that to them, and I did it in a nice way. And then everybody walked away from the table like, wow, that's just spreading what you know, and then kind of bringing people to the table. No, I hear what you're saying, but in my experience, this.
Yes.
And they don't know. I said, we can't shoot to maim. That's a lawsuit. You can't. This is not the Wild Wild West.
Right.
You know, you resist this much, then the officer can use this much. Use this much resistance, then they can use this much. If you get to the top of that triangle, I've heard they've changing it now, and it's not a force continuum, it's just a whatever, but it's still the same thing.
Yeah.
If I'm pulling my gun out and you know, I'm easing the slack off the trigger, I'm giving you commands, it's a deadly force situation.
Yeah. How much you think, you know, right now is just people not having knowledge like that, for instance?
Tons.
Like putting labels. I mean, you know, you look at everything we've been through the last 4 years with COVID and those type of things. And through that, if you didn't put a black box on Instagram or whatever, you are a racist. You don't support Black Lives Matter, you're a racist. If you don't support biological men competing in female sports, you're a transphobe. You know, it's either this or that. If you think this way, you're a Trump supporter. You think that way, you're a Biden supporter. And I had a post a few years ago where in the comments, I got called a left-wing libtard and a right-wing conspiracy theorist. I'm like, I'm doing pretty good because
you're in the middle.
Yeah, there we go.
You're averaged out.
Yeah. But you know, talk a little about that, because we are seeing right now in society, hearing that there's groups that are like ready for it to all in and, you know, swoop in with their guns and stuff. It seems like if we don't get a grip and have some common sense, we could be headed that way.
Absolutely. I truly believe that. Now, I've been retired since June of 21. I still continued working with the Bureau pretty extensively for 6 months after that. So let's just say up until 2022, I don't have my thumb on the pulse anymore, with the exception of I'm involved with groups like Eradicate Hate, or I go and teach at the Tennessee Gang Conference, or for ROCIC, or these big organizations where I'm interacting with people who are on the ground right now still working this stuff. But yeah, that's my thought process. If we don't come back towards the middle and we don't get some common sense, I will say that I won't say that it will happen, but I'll say that the odds for it and the ability for it to happen is pretty strong. You have a lot of people who are quiet and they are well stocked on weapons. Now there's some that train every weekend. Now, is that who you want making a tactical entry? Not from what I've seen from most of them, but it's still a person with a gun. And like I've said to me in interviews and wherever, there's not a boilerplate picture, right? You can't look at a picture and go, oh, that's a white supremacist.
Right.
Oh, and I usually tell people, I go, if I would have shown you a picture, and these are usually jacked up, you know, type A's are like, oh, that person's a wimp, you're going to scare them. I go, oh, no. Dead is dead. Let's get that straight, right? If I would have shown you a picture of the Columbine kids before Columbine happened, what would you have said?
Right.
If you looked at their picture, what would you have said of a picture of I'm not going to say their names. I say them when I'm teaching Undercover because I have to explain what I'm doing, but I don't want to, you know, in the tactical world and when we're out teaching active shooter stuff, we don't want to mention the murderer's name because that's what they want. So, but let's just say the Charleston church shooter. If I would have shown you a picture of that kid, what would you have said? Bowl haircut, tank top, skinny, holding a 45. The kid from Aurora, orange, yellow hair, and this, that, and the other. But man, they still have the ability to kill.
Yeah.
So you just got to be careful.
Yeah. No.
And then, I mean, there's so many tangents we could go off on, like mental health and this, that, and the other. Yeah. But for me, and I've said this at the Eradicate Hate Conference, and I'm like, I am not a be-all, end-all, and I hope I don't come off that way. I'm just telling you my experiences. But for me, in 28 years of law enforcement, and if I look beyond before and after, it all starts at home. Mm-hmm. It all starts at home.
Well, you think about, you know, in all communities, really, like when there's not a father in the home,
yeah,
you know, you have a lot more problems. That is actually one of the main things right now. You know, you look at one of the reasons I didn't support Black Lives Matter is because if you look at their website, you could tell it was a communist organization.
Yeah.
It said that they wanted to do away with a nuclear family. It's like, well, why would you want to separate the family? We see, you know, what happened when we brought in welfarism in the 1960s. What happened in the black communities, separated them from, you know, basically gave incentives to not keep a family, separate the kids from their fathers. And, you know, now I forget the statistics, but it's a, you know, very high fatherless rate in those homes. And
yeah.
that to me is a number one cause actually of a lot of those issues in those communities. Why do you think though, like whoever's pushing these buttons, they have to know that not bringing families together is a good thing?
I've heard you say this about yourself too. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Mm-hmm. But it is a fact that our adversaries overseas, China, Russia, they do put money into the states, mm-hmm. And not just on white supremacy side. Right. They do it on the far left side, and they pump money because they want chaos. They want America. Yeah. You know, death to America. They want all this stuff. I think there's some of that, but I can also counter and tell you that some of the people I've arrested, the father's there. But they put blinders on. Well, sure. I thought it was just a phase. Right. Let me get this straight. Your 21-year-old son doesn't have a job. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have a car. But he's got an arsenal mm-hmm. in his closet. He's wearing plate carriers to the equivalent of what the FBI wears. Mm-hmm. Cry precision, expensive stuff. And he's got grown men coming to your 100-acre farm mm-hmm. and training all the time wearing Flecktarn camo because it's Germans pattern. There's a skull on his table with swastikas and runes. Nothing against the runes, but you know, a lot of your white supremacy groups are moving into that paganism movement. I've got plenty of friends that are pagans, and they're pissed about it because it's like this is this is not what we are. But right next to the skull is Siege, the book from James Mason, and on the other side is Mein Kampf from Hitler. And you're telling me that you thought it was a phase?
Yeah.
You know? Oh, you put those thoughts in his head. Actually, sir, I did not. Right. I was just as shocked as anybody else when your son said we were going to go murder people. Yeah. I thought we were going to put up flyers. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's wild. It's not just obviously the father's not being in the home. It is turning a blind eye. But you know, it does seem like there is some type of movement that is not open in public, but it is open because we can see it happening. Yeah. Like we can see right now the division that's being caused. We can see right now critical thinking and putting people in boxes and saying, no, you can't think in the middle as you're talking about. You're either going to be right here or right here. Right. You know, if you agree with this, you've got to be a Biden supporter. If you agree with this, you got to be a horrible person. You know, it's like this, just throwing these stones, and we've lost our humanity through it seems.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in that. Because we were concerned about our kids, you know, going to school, and you know, when I went to school, the teacher's job was to present the facts, and then the students in the room might say, well, I lean more to pro-life. Well, I lean more to, you know, pro-choice. Well, let's have a debate. But we're not like burning stuff down, right? You know, or here's the facts. Not me telling you the way I want you to know it and then skewing people. That would be I would have an issue with that if somebody was doing that with my family members. Yeah. But it's just division. It's just division. And I'll tell you, I'm a believer, right? Mm-hmm. That's me. Yeah, I'm not trying to preach to anybody, but you want to know how I made it through a lot of undercovers? My faith. That's a prayer. And even when I didn't have my faith, my wife did. Mm-hmm. you know. And there are stories that I can tell you that, I mean, you can say what you want, but I know, and she knows without a shadow of a doubt, it was God, right? So whatever you believe in, but it's just evil is what's happening.
Yes.
I don't care which belief system you got. Maybe you don't think there's such a thing as evil. I usually, I have friends who are agnostic. I have friends who are atheists. And it's like, you know, they don't believe there's a God. Okay, I got that. Okay, do you believe in evil? Oh yeah, I believe in evil.
Yeah, absolutely.
so it ebbs and flows. But this whole division of, oh, I hate you. Go back and watch some Bugs Bunny cartoon from back in the day.
Right.
Not too far back because they were not politically correct at all. But, you know, like 80s, 90s, it's just somebody whispering in this ear. Did you hear what he just said about you?
Right.
Are you going to take that? And that same person goes to the other side and goes, guess what they're saying over there?
Yeah.
And you're like, and then the next thing you know, it's fisticuffs.
Right.
You know?
No, it is to me good versus evil.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's obvious that there are evil forces trying to push, you know, this agenda because, you know, they make it to where if you speak out, you're the bad guy for saying it. And if you go against what is, I'm going to call it pop culture right now, which I think a lot of is just pop culture. Oh, this is the way you're supposed to think about this. And if you don't put your Ukraine flag up there, you're this. And it's like, I don't agree with any of it, actually. I'm not even thinking in those ways. But you know, I really do. I think that it's good versus evil. And you know, that's why I pray a lot. Yeah. You know, like it's a multiple time a day, you know, type thing. Hey, what do I do here? I'm just going to trust, you know. But when I feel the evil, I notice it. I recognize it. Yeah. You know, and I think that we're seeing a lot of that right now in society. So to kind of parlay off of that, you know, generally, historically, what I've found and what I remember growing up, kids. And again, this is before all the video games and stuff like they have today. But before they're desensitized, they are very sensitive and they can pick up on evil pretty damn quick. It's the adults who can't because we've been so desensitized. Mm-hmm. We've seen so many things, right? And like you said, if everybody says this is the norm now, and that's all you hear every day from every outlet you go to, yeah, I can see you believe in it for sure. You don't know there's anything different. Exactly. You know? It could be somebody, I mean, from my world. They believe in the life of crime because this, and this, and they think they can do whatever they want. And my argument always was, one of my arguments was always, don't hate me for being a law enforcement officer. I'm a peace officer, but my job is to enforce the law. If you don't like the laws, then just get them changed. Yeah, go change them. But since I've retired, there's plenty of places in the United States where they're just picking and choosing what laws they want to enforce and not. Yeah. And depending on who the person is. And I'm like, well, that's not. That took away my whole argument because I don't even know what to tell you from that. Yeah, that's wild. The weaponization of the Department of Justice. Yeah, it's pretty obvious. I mean, you're seeing these political cases. It's hard. It's hard not to argue against. Well, yeah, So my girlfriend's dad was U.S. attorney for 20 plus years. Okay, and I mean, we talk about it. He's like, yeah, it's obvious right now. Yeah, it has been weaponized, and he's a pretty middle of the road guy, but. But even when you're doing your job, it doesn't matter whether you're left or right. When you're doing your job as a law enforcement officer or as a U.S. attorney or as a judge, you have to be unbiased. Right. I've sat across the table from many of child molesters. My personal beliefs wouldn't do too well. Right. But I'm trying to do a job and I'm unbiased. And yes, I can do that. Yeah. People may not believe you can do that, but I can. No, I mean, if that's what your job is, you got to get in the mindset and you're in it for the right reasons. You understand the importance of not having a bias and, you know, not, and that is what's so weird. You know, it seems to be in the media, you know, across the board within the Justice Department. You know, I think Trump ignited so much fear in people. And I like to say Trump likes to cut and pour salt in wounds. And I never saw him de-escalate or diffuse anything. And, you know, I liked a lot of his policies, but and I have a lot of friends that are Trump supporters. I wasn't one. Yeah. And I said when he got elected that the left isn't going to be able to handle his rhetoric and it's going to cause ultimate civil unrest. And you know, if you ask my parents or my business partners, the first 3 years, I'm like, there's no way they're going to let him be president. There's no way they're going to be let him be president again. They're going to do something to get him out. The economy's going to crash. Something's going to happen, crazy event. And then in January 2020, I was like, well, guys, I guess I was wrong. I shouldn't be so. And then, March, COVID hits. And, I have some.
The almighty evil.
I mean, what are the odds? Think about this. What are the odds that a once in a 200-year virus, maybe even longer, comes around during the most contentious presidential race in the history of our country, probably. One of them, at least in our lifetime.
Yeah.
What are the odds of that? I don't think, it would be astronomical if you were to actually run it. So that just happened to happen in March of 2020 when Trump was going to be reelected. And the economy was going great. Things were going great. Yeah. Overall, except that the other side was so mad. Actually, the world, not just the other side. Trump just smacked them all, and cut them all, and poured salt in all the wounds. Yeah. What are the odds, do you think, that just happened?
It's definitely a good argument. Yeah. And they've gone after him pretty hard. But again, he would never, in my opinion, wouldn't be quiet.
Right.
The nanny boo boo stuff. I'm like, come on.
You can see how that, and that was the part that was.
But he's a billionaire.
He is.
And I've been backstage with Vince McMahon many, many times.
Yeah.
And that's not a character. Yeah. That is him.
No, I believe it. It's just.
They make decisions and they make them. That's it.
Yeah. It's just that you have to see that ultimately it's going to end, it's going to end badly.
Well, I picture this too. Say your entourage or your team's around you. Mm-hmm. And let's just say you go out there and you did this nanny boo boo stuff and you go backstage and it's the other old white guys going, high five, you spanked them. But if you're like me and a lot of my peers watching it, we're going, come on, what did you,
Right.
What are we doing?
Yes.
What are we doing? And again, it's still causing division one way or another.
Yeah. Well, that's, the country was, I'm going to say, compared to now, it was just a little bit divided during Obama. It wasn't that bad.
Nope.
And
your militias started rising back up during those 8 years, though, because they were worried about gun laws.
Okay,
that's where because they died out. But that 8 years, and it's not Obama's fault. It's just what I'm saying.
Sure.
It's that belief system of they're coming to get our guns. They're coming because they actually said it on multiple occasions.
Right.
And then if you remember, we're cracking down on guns, and the next day the gun sales go through the roof because everybody's like, buy them up, boys. Well, girls.
I kind of like that. As far as we have a Second Amendment to protect us against a tyrannical government. So the fact that people are arming themselves as a right of a citizen, I like that idea. You take it too far, obviously, there's issues with that.
Yeah.
But, so they were a little worried. But then Trump got in office and he went hard in the paint. And I appreciate how courageous he was in the sense that he stood up to what I consider some very evil people and things.
Yeah.
I appreciated that part. At the same time, I wondered if it, is it just courage or can he not see that you got to show a little humbleness and realize if you really want what's best for the world, you want best for humanity, you want best for our kids and our grandchildren, sometimes you'll say sorry. Sometimes you'll say, I made a mistake.
Yep.
Sometimes you'll put a hand out and say, you know what?
My bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it was, he just pushed so hard. I saw it coming the entire time. Like the guys, there's no way. I loved a lot of his policies. There's no way that they're going to allow this guy to be in again. And then, then the COVID thing happened. This time around, and this is where it's weird. I'm still not. I wouldn't consider myself a Trump supporter. I'll probably vote for him this time, but I wouldn't consider myself a big supporter. But I can't deny that they're going after him so hard on a bunch of bogus things.
Yeah.
The rape trial. That was that's a civil case, but that was awful. He didn't even, the lady didn't even remember what year it happened.
Yeah.
But she's going to remember, give me a break. It was just, you saw her on TV talking about,
Well, the double standards are the big issue for
yes.
me. If you're going to do it, let's do it fair across the board. It goes back to remember the old story? If you don't have enough candy for everybody in the room, you can't have a piece.
Right.
So just do it fair across the board.
Yeah.
If the FBI says no beards, that means nobody has a beard.
Right.
Period.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's we're in a weird spot, and all I'm trying to do is, spread the knowledge that I've learned, pay it forward, and I still learn.
Yeah. How do we bring people together though in this time? Do you think that there's more people out there kind of like with our thought process of it, that realize that we need to come together?
I think we're seeing more of it now simply because a lot of the left party has gone so far left.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if the right party went that far right? It would be white supremacy is what it would be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So people who are still left or people who are still right, and I don't even want to call them moderate, they're just not like way the hell off the page.
Sure.
They're saying, I mean, like Bill Maher, look at him. How many, when Fox News is quoting Bill Maher all the time, you're like, he's like, I'm still a Democrat.
Right.
I've just stayed where I'm at. So I think a lot of people are starting to see. And again, if you're looking at election stuff, and I'm no guru by any means, but what's being talked about at the kitchen table? Bro, I mean, a 6-ounce ribeye is $25, but I can get the pork shoulder for 23. I guess I'm eating pork this week.
Right.
You know? I retired at 50 because we get a pension, but we have what's called a thrift savings plan, which is basically a 401k. For me, being a former cop, not coming from a ton of money, having to earn everything, you know, that was a sick amount of money. That's why I retired at 50. It's nowhere near what it was.
Yeah. Well, it's down 25% just in 3 years.
Yeah. And I'm like, you know, and shame on me for not catching the stocks going down, but, you know, I take 2 weeks off, I come back, and it's in half. So we'll see. But for me, with what I know, and I know there's all kinds of things, because again, with Eradicate Hate and groups like that, Life After Hate, they've got all kinds of academia, they've got this, they've got other avenues. But for me, it's just about talking. And not everybody can do that, but let's just sit down and have a conversation. Let's just start there.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I was saying earlier that I had one of our scientists here in Nashville a couple days ago, and he's got, say, different political views on how to do things than I do. But I mean, I love talking to him because he's really smart. He's got 2 PhDs, protein crystallography and theoretical chemistry. I don't even know what those things are. Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. You know, he's older man, let's say about, 75, and has had a great career. And so, but we can sit and talk. I'm giving him my side on this. He's giving, and I learned a little bit. I'm like, oh, this is good. I love learning. I wouldn't have learned if we weren't able to have that conversation, didn't have the, these days, respect for each other to be able to have that conversation with different ideas. But it seems like we're afraid of ideas that aren't popular.
Yeah. And on that note, I can waffle like quick. I can come in and put it on the table and go, this is what it is, and this is why I believe this. And then somebody, like you said, different view, but we can talk. They explain something, and I go, oh, well, based on that new knowledge I have, I completely reverse what I just said. And that's how I've always worked.
Yeah.
I mean, let's put everything on the table. Let's start poking holes at it, like develop a case strategy. Let's come up with it. Let's pick the one that's the best. It doesn't, work with people. And this is what I used to say as a trainer, because we went through these phases, right? And raising kids. And I think every parent wants their kids to do better than them, even if they had it good. But then we got to this whole thing where you had like, helicopter parenting. Fine, that's what you want to do. But if you're a trainer or a football coach or something like that, a fighting coach, or, you're training firearms and tactics in the FBI or at your police department, you start seeing these the culture change. And then you see everybody gets a trophy. And then you see nobody is really failing. And then when they become an adult and they fail for the first time, it's almost a nervous breakdown. Or the other side that we would see is I would just ask people when they would come into the bureau, and I wasn't trying to be a complete ass or anything, but I'm joking a little bit, but I'd say, have you ever played a team sport? I was going to break it down even more. Have you ever had to work with somebody else to accomplish a goal? That's my first question. My second question is, have you ever failed at something? Because I started seeing, in my personal opinion, those were some huge issues.
Yeah.
And a lot of times in these last several years, the answer is no to both.
They haven't failed?
Never failed because they've always been given everything.
Oh my gosh.
Right? And I'm like, I was on a football team that lost every game.
Yeah.
0-10.
I mean, you think about it. Like,
Every week that one guy's going, it's a new week. We're 0-0. No, we're not. We're 0-7.
Well,
we suck.
That's kind of like the idea of everybody gets a trophy.
Yes.
And I mean, from sports, I mean, in competition, you're going to lose.
Absolutely.
I mean, there is nobody that's undefeated forever.
Right.
And I wrestled in junior high and high school, and for half a semester, or for a semester in college. And I lost a lot, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I think my senior year, I was somewhere around, I might be off here, but like 60 and 13. You know, that's 13 losses.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good record, but that's 13 losses that year. You know, the year before that was worse.
Mean you actually won some after you lost?
Right.
So that's right. Building that intestinal fortitude.
Yeah,
right?
but you got to learn how to lose, and not like what success is going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're losing that in society now. You know, you're talking about that incel thing. I had heard of that. I didn't know what it was, but now it was kind of like as we're talking, I'm remembering. You know, I see like this movement right now to make men more masculine, and I'm like, okay, yeah, we do have a lot of weak men right now, and we need to get more masculine men that are okay with being men. But I see some of the stuff being taught that I'm like, well, that's not exactly what true, you know, being a man is. That's like, you know, it's almost like they're trying to prove it, and you know, the incel stuff, I had heard that, and some of those guys were kind of in that, you know, in that movement per se. And it's like almost like this watered down version of masculinity because society has already been pushed down. Men have already been pushed down so weak, they don't even know how to be men. So it's like they're grasping at straws.
Yeah. I'm old enough to remember the Little Rascals. That's all I'm thinking is when you say incel, I keep seeing the He-Man, what is it? He-Man Woman Haters Club.
Yeah.
That's what they had on their treehouse. Yeah, I don't know. You know, it's a weird culture. But again, there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think like as we're talking, just what comes up for me is like speaking up as a human being on what is good. And, you know, against what's evil.
Yeah.
And, you know, to do that, you've got to come from a place of love because a lot of times there's no benefit.
Yeah. And as from parenting or just being adults overseeing youth, I'm huge on anti-bullying, right? I am bullying and used to, you know, in our day, the bullying stopped when you left school and you went home. But now with social media, I mean, they're getting bullied all through the night. And you see it time after time. Somebody commits suicide or somebody nuts out and comes in and shoots up the school. You know, those are it goes back to the division though, right? But I just wanted to throw that anti-bullying thing in there because I'm not a fan of bullying at all.
Well, it's causing, you know, like you're talking about mass shootings. Like it's, I think one of the causes. What do you think, you know, are the causes of all the mass shootings that we're experiencing every week now?
Oof. That's not a loaded question, but that's a tough one because from what I've seen and the studies that we've done, it's always the after action, right? The after action report. We start diving back in after the fact, and you start looking and you go, oh man, there was a sign there, there was a sign there, there was a sign there. Problem is, as far as law enforcement goes, a lot of times you can't do anything. You can go over there and say, yeah, he said he's going to shoot up the school. Okay, can I lock him up for that? Well, if it meets these standards.
Sure.
And if an attorney is willing to take the case. But some of them, I mean, there's a lot of that stuff's bullying or diving down that belief system, you know?
You think it's like you see these people super mentally ill?
Some, yeah. Well, I mean, look at the Sandy Hook massacre, right? That guy was off his meds, you know. The guy that killed Dimebag Darrell, that was it wasn't necessarily a mass shooting event, but off his meds, you know.
Well, I ask because, I mean, you think about this wasn't happening 30 years ago. And they blame guns. Oh, it's guns. Like, well, I mean, I understand the gun was used, but something has had to happen in society for us to just go and want to kill a bunch of people. Like, it's not normal.
Yeah. Some of the things we put together in the blocks I teach is kids online. Parents are just letting them play whatever. These games are so freaking realistic. The only thing that's not realistic is in the video game, you can respawn when you die.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doesn't necessarily work too well here on Earth, but there's that desensitization. But I'm going to borrow a term from an acquaintance friend of mine, because we were having this conversation. He's a very intellectual guy. Was a former police officer in England, and he teaches in Philadelphia. And I was asking him, I go, so what I did is I was coming from an active shooter instructor school, and we were asking the question, what has changed? What is exactly what you just said? And I posed the same question to him, just over some drinks, just kind of spitballing. And he said, you have to take away the opportunity. And I was like, okay, let's dive into that.
What do you mean?
Because there are more opportunities for people to do bad things. Like, can you get that gun? However, but you can block weapons all you want, but if the parent has a gun and they go get that gun, you got to take away that opportunity. I put it back to, it's very simplistic, but when I was a cop, you always had to work side jobs if you wanted to make any kind of daggone money at all. And there was one in South Carolina called Frankie's Fun Park. It's basically, you go there, you can do putt-putt, go-karts, video games, all that stuff, pizza, ice cream, you name it. But when you started to see, and I was taught this by the older officer when I first came on, he goes, now listen, if you see these kids congregating over in the corner and stuff, and they're not spending money, because you need to go bust them up. He goes, because nothing good's going to come out of it. He was 100% right. So what was I doing by going over there and going, hey, what are you guys doing? Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, all right. You going to ride some rides or whatever? Okay, all right, okay. They disperse. I took away the opportunity, right? It's very simple, but I thought that was very, very profound when he said that.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
So does that mean a cop on the corner? I don't know. If nobody respects cops anymore, maybe not. Can you do your job as a cop? I mean, I've got friends in Austin, and again, not left or right, but I'm just telling you the facts. That DA came in and started pulling uses of force cases that were completely cleared up to 6 years prior. They were telling me at one point there was 35 officers on the payroll indicted.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm telling you, as a law enforcement officer retired, and I may bond back in.
Sure.
And give it another 2 years to round it out to a nice 30. It kind of makes you wonder about doing your job.
Well, yeah. I mean, I can't imagine who would want to go in and be a cop these days.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't like I don't like police brutality, right?
Right, so of course not.
I thought it was a really good thing. Yeah, it shouldn't
happen at all if you get trainings, right?
Right, but there was a lot of it going on. I mean, it is, I look back, because I come from the fight world, and I look back at some of the cops, conversations, and it was, and I still consider them good people. It was just a mindset.
It's a different time.
Not now.
They'd lay a thumping on you and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I always thought it was wrong, though. I didn't like it. I liked, they were good people, but it was the mentality of it. And so I thought it was good when they brought cameras in. I think good.
Yep.
We need cameras. But the way people treat cops and how, I mean, they're human beings. So you're getting pulled over and you're talking shit to this guy. Like, that's a human being. You don't know if he had a bad day, just broke up with his wife, just had you don't know what's going on with him. He's another human being, and you might catch him at a bad time. And if you push those buttons too much, yeah, you're in a bad situation. Yeah. And so I've been blown away at how people treat the cops now. Yeah. And there's no middle ground. Yes, I think a lot of cops it was a different time, a different era of how to do policing. And just like we've gone through different eras throughout,
there wasn't as much fight training either.
Right.
It was just swing a stick.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And now it is a different time, but we've got to, if we don't respect cops just as human beings, the golden rule, how would you want to be treated? Now, if they're a jerk, I mean, I still wouldn't personally,
I've been pulled over by cops when I was a cop and they were jerks.
Yeah.
I didn't put up with it.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
If they're a jerk, it's one thing, but if they're respectful, they're doing their job. I'm going to have my hands on the steering wheel. I'm going to turn the light on. Yep. Yes, sir. No, sir. And be respectful. And I've never had a run-in. Now, I got arrested when I was 20. I had a run-in there just because I was doing something illegal. But I haven't had a run-in in a traffic stop type issue. I had one time and this is a people thing. This isn't a cop thing. It's not a cop thing. It's a people thing, a border patrol thing. I cross that border in TJ all the time, because the hospital's in there. And I was with my dad one day crossing. My parents would come out and spend some time out there with us, and I didn't have my passport, which my passport was lost, and so I'm crossing constantly with a lost passport. I have to deal with it every single time. It's what it is. And he says, "Well, how am I supposed to know who you are?" I was like, "Oh, can you look it up in the system?" And he started just berating me.
Yeah.
And he goes back to the thing. My dad's like, "Stay calm, Ed." And that point, I'm like, man to man, like I'm ready to fight this guy.
Yeah.
So, but that's the human aspect.
Nobody talks to me like that.
Right. It's like he was a jerk.
That's my head.
Yeah. Why are you being such a jerk? But that's the human aspect. And so I feel like, and that was just one guy. I've crossed that border. I don't know. I mean, the Border Patrol could probably tell us, but like 500, 1,000 times. I don't know how many times. And that was one instance that stuck out. Like, for the most part, I'm dealing with them. They're nice people.
Yeah.
They treat us very well. So I feel like we've lost our humanity in how we treat others, or treat cops, because they've become the enemy, and it's cool for them to be the enemy.
So you said earlier about is it this the lack of knowledge, and I'll go back to that. So when Ferguson, Missouri happened, and a lot of people, I don't know if they know it or not, but the hands up, don't shoot thing, that was in the beginning. It never happened. And it came out.
Yeah, right.
It never happened. And I'm not trying to take up for white over black. I mean, I've got tons of black friends, and look, wrong is wrong,
yep.
right? But that guy was in fear for his life. Mm-hmm. He was in his car. The dude's trying to take his gun off of him, beating him. There was never a hands up, don't shoot situation. But after all that happened, I remember news coverage of, I can't remember which town it was, but what they did is they brought in media and, whatever, activists or whatever, let us run you through some of our training. And all it is, we call it FATS training, but it's the simulated, it's a screen. You have a gun that reads on that screen when you shoot it. What we were doing in our FBI office was we're sitting there, but our legal person's behind us. Mm-hmm. So when we make that shot, and I would have that legal person come during force-on-force training when we're shooting paint rounds and stuff. If you did a shooting and it was a deadly force, now you after that scenario is over, you have to explain why you did what you did. Mm-hmm. And then they're going to tell you if it's covered under deadly force or not. Mm. But what happened is once those people went in and they saw how quick they had to make a split decision of life or death, and they all came out going, "Oh my goodness." What's unfortunate is we can't put that on for everybody.
Right.
But that would be great to put out there. Just like me, like you said, you sit down at a table with somebody who may have different beliefs for you, but we actually have a conversation and you learn something.
Right.
That would be great. I told a lot of my friends and acquaintances, I'm like, man, what I would love is once that thing happens, let's go right to the cop. Let's take the camera. Let's take the camera from the dash and let's put it right on the news live feed. But you want to play it from beginning to end, not 5 seconds in the middle.
Right.
So you can't see it, play it all. I said, but you can't do that because it's now an active investigation. Mm-hmm. But when the truth does come out, whether it's different or the same as what you got in the beginning, it's like 6 months later and it's on page 40.
Yep.
And it's just, and bad things have already happened.
Yeah, that specific case I remember because that was a turning point. Mm-hmm. Because it was a hands up, don't shoot. Hands up, don't shoot. Everybody was saying that. And I remember my first reaction was, this has got to stop. Like, this is bullshit. Like, this is like 2012, 2013, if I remember. And I posted something, and one of my SWAT friends messaged me and said, "Hey, get the full story first."
Yeah.
And I was like, he's right. Okay. And, it was a turning point, I think, at least in society, because it was one where they had said one thing happened and it was completely another.
I've been on, let's just say, ground zero many times in my career. Well, we're there investigating something and then it comes on the news and it is completely
different.
Completely different. And that's the thing. Now, if a cop does something wrong, man, I'll be the first to tell you. There was one in North Charleston, South Carolina. The footage was terrible. He shoots this guy walking away from him, realizes he's messed up, but is so panicky because he did it. He starts trying to cover it up, but the camera's still on. He goes over and sits a taser on him and goes, "Okay, I'm going to say he's got my..." No. Well, they put that dude under the jail. I mean, He's done, and he should have never been a law enforcement officer. But I will tell you, as a trainer, again, me and my peers, mentors, and people I've mentored, a lot of these things you see, it may look horrific, and it is horrific. But from a cop standpoint, I'm going, that's a lack of training. It's a lack of training, and and that's sad because the bottom line is police departments and sheriff's offices around this country do not have a lot of money.
Yeah,
almost all of them only required to shoot and qualify once a year because bullets cost money.
Wow.
The FBI, you qualify 4 times a year.
Yeah.
And then we're always doing all kinds of other trainings and stuff. But that's the thing. It's I mean, there's so many avenues we can go down, but it's just knowledge.
Yeah.
And let's not be so quick to judge.
Yeah, that's
right. But it's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard not to.
We all mess up.
Yeah.
And do it. But we've got if we've learned anything at this point, we got to wait to get the story.
Yeah.
We've got to, because you never know what's being put out in front of us. Like, is it propaganda? Is it coming from the left? Is it coming from the right? What's the angle?
And we're going back to undercovers. Like one of the guys I was talking to who's kind of flipped now. Well, he's not kind of, he's flipped now. We were first talking, and he goes, "Yeah, look, I know you're a good guy." He goes, "But the FBI, they put undercovers in, and they start the ones spreading all this stuff, and then when that guy says, 'Oh yeah, let's do it,' and then you arrest them," I go, "Ah," I said, "I know that's what's reported."
Yeah,
I go, "But I know a lot of those undercovers," and I said, "And I'm telling you, without a shadow of a doubt, there's no way they did it." And I said, "And I can tell you from my experience. Let's not even talk about people that I wasn't there. Let's just talk about my experiences." Like I said, I never brought up murder. I never brought up murder. I thought we were going to put up flyers, but we were like, why did they say bring the guns? We got to find out what's going on. You make a phone call. Guy won't tell you. You make another phone call 3 days later because the Atlanta team's going, something's not right. We need to find out. Guy won't tell me. But he says, I'm not going to do it over the phone, but if you want to come down here, I'll tell you. I'll be there tomorrow. And that's when he comes out and says, essentially, we're going to kill some people. So that wasn't any kind of entrapment.
Yeah.
But the story would be, of course, a lot of times it comes out and goes, "Oh, the FBI entrapped."
Well, yeah, I think right now that is the feeling, and maybe it's because it's coming from the top and what's going on with Trump. But the FBI doesn't have a good, public perception right now.
we haven't since Comey.
Oh, yeah.
The FBI took the baton and has not dropped it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's rough right now. But January 6th, a lot of people say there were a lot of undercover agent provocateurs pushing, stuff like that. Do you believe that?
I would find that hard to believe. I wasn't there. I did infiltrate militia groups who were there, waiting on, in their words, waiting on the word from the commander. In other words, they've dove down this rabbit hole, and they literally believe that they are there to take over the government, just like 1776.
Yeah.
And if Trump, who they're saying was their guy, which Trump doesn't know them, but if he would have said, "Let's go get them," there was a lot of people there, which begs the question to me, at least, how as a law enforcement community or an intelligence community, did we not look at this and say, could be a powder keg getting ready to go off, and not have a boatload of stuff there to take away the opportunity?
Yeah.
Right? National Guard, all this other stuff. But I wasn't there for the planning, and I try my best not to Monday morning quarterback and all that stuff, because I've been under the microscope many times, and people are second guessing, and it's just not cool. But I personally don't know of any undercovers. And one of the reasons I would say that is because if you have, I'm also looking at it from an operational standpoint. If I'm the undercover coordinator, or even if I'm the lead tactical guy providing advice to the division, one undercover in a sea of hundreds of thousands of people, if all hell breaks loose, what is our extraction plan? How in the hell are we going to protect that undercover? So that, I'm not sure. Sources, I would find it hard to believe we didn't have some. I mean, just like going back to Charlottesville.
Sure.
There had to be sources in there. Or we're not doing our job.
Right.
Maybe not, I'm not saying maybe we're not tasking them, but if we don't have a single source that can provide us information out of hundreds of thousands of people that are there, I don't believe as a case agent I'm doing my job.
Yeah.
If that's my area of responsibility.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because that is kind of like a thought.
But could it have happened? Yeah,
sure, it could have. You don't know, but that's the thing. I've got some other friends that are FBI agents, and great guys. And I look at the rap it gets right now, and it's like,
It's sad.
I don't feel like most of the people in the FBI are like that. I think it's probably like most people in the FBI are good people, and they've been caught up with this whole politicizing of the FBI and the weaponization of the DOJ, and they all get put in this group. You're a left-wing libtard or you're a right-wing conspiracy theorist. Like, no. They could be just great cops.
You can be agents. A Trump supporter. So there's a system called Guardian, right? Mm-hmm. And that's basically where all the leads get cut. But people have access, other departments, National Guard, everybody has access to create a Guardian lead. Mm-hmm. So once that lead's created, it may go to somebody and we'd be like, oh, this is BS, blah, blah, blah. After the Parkland school shooting, it came out, there was this, I can't remember what it was called, but basically there's a big phone bank taking in leads, and there is, but they're not investigators. They're not law enforcement officers. And it came out after the fact, that kid that shot up Parkland had been complained on more than once. And somebody said, well, this is nothing, but they weren't law enforcement. Mm-hmm. Not saying that would have made a difference, but pretty much after that fact, up until when I retired, if somebody creates a Guardian lead, we had to go interview them, or we had to show we cannot find this person at all. I mean, I've gone with people to interview because somebody actually drafted a lead that said the woman said she was kidnapped by ISIS, and they replaced her eyes with, I always mess it up, it was either alligator eyes or tiger eyes. I think it was alligator eyes because they're pretty distinct, right? Mm. And I'm like, we have to go out and find this woman and interview her to find out if she's got alligator eyes. I'm like, are you kidding me? But you had to, because that's the rule. So after January, by the way, this is how the conversation goes. You knock on the door and they go, hello. And you go, I'm Special Agent Scott Payne. This is Task Force Officer, blah, 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 blah. We're here to, we're good. You don't have alligator eyes. It's good. We'll see you. You know what I mean? It's like, but that's what it became.
Right.
And so after January 6th, or from January 6th and on until I retired, I mean, what you weren't able to say when you go, say it's you, I got to come knock on your door. It might be 10 o'clock at night. You just got a Trump support sign in your front yard. That does not mean you're a white supremacist. Does not mean you're a hateful person,
right,
no matter what label people want to put on you.
Right.
Some are, of course, but not all, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm knocking on your door. I can't tell you that the lead came from your sister-in-law who says that she thinks you might be planning something bad because on a Facebook post you said, everybody get ready.
Right.
But now I've got to come knock on your door.
Right.
And that just started spewing over and over. But I had the co-writer on my book pointed out to me, because she did a lot of journalism overseas in the desert and stuff. She said, but what did the FBI do after 9/11? And I went, oh yeah, I guess, I mean, think of Japanese people after World War II, the Pearl Harbor bomb, you know? Mm-hmm. So we have this knee-jerk reaction aspect. But we're also, I mean, I'm optimistic. I'm definitely a glass is half full guy. Mm-hmm. We're trying to make sure nothing bad's going to happen.
Sure.
I can't tell you how many people I've gone out and interviewed, and because of a lead came in and they said something pretty radical, and I'm like, hey, I don't think I need to explain how times are right now, but you're well within your First Amendment right. I took an oath to uphold all amendments, not just one or two, but I just want to make sure you're not really planning on doing nothing bad, are you? Because we just want to make sure that innocent people aren't being hurt, and sometimes that's enough, you know?
Yeah. What about the base case when you closed it or when it finished? How did that happen?
So I'm doing that rhetorical right? You know, so kind of goes like this. We've gotten into the group, or I'd gotten into the group. We as a team, but I'm the undercover, right? We get in there. I start gaining the trust of a lot of people. We do a lot of trainings. And by the way, a 19-year-old kid led carbine training with the ARs, machine guns, semi-automatic. He led the training and some of the tactics training, and it was good. It was not bad. Wasn't the best, but I'm thinking to myself, if this guy really did break bad, he could get the drop on a lot of people because he's fast and accurate. Now, Adderall had a little bit to do with that because they would all pump that before we'd go out and training, and I'm like, I'm good. I'll just drink my coffee. But we started uncovering some different things. And like I said, they tied in the paganism stuff, and we would go down and do blots. And like I might pray to the Norse pantheon god of whoever. And then you would see the one guy, he says, well, I'm in the Egyptian pantheon. And he starts praying to some demon. And it's about like flesh melting off and blood and gore. And I'm like, boy, he's angry. I'm going to keep an eye on him, you know. But we started uncovering several plots. We had the murder plots. That were going to be what they believed was an Antifa couple in Georgia, but that was just the start. Luke, who went by the moniker TMB, the militant Buddhist, he had already started a list. Him and Pestilence had already started a list of like journalists and like news people, like on TV. And I'm like, I said, oh, so let me get this straight. We're going to actually kill these people that are on TV too. And they're like, yeah, this is just the beginning. And I'm like, well, it's a good thing we've got this family to do our first dry run on, you know. And again, it's the acts and furtherance of, right? So one guy bought bag catchers. They attach to your AR. So if we did have to shoot them, instead of the brass coming out and hitting the ground, that bag catches it. If you want to kill somebody, these are other ideas. If you want to kill somebody, let's do it with a revolver because it doesn't eject the brass. You can put a silencer on that revolver. They were going through all this. One will post here. They wanted me to go down with them to kill the family, and then Pestilence would burn the house down. We started uncovering all this stuff. Meanwhile, the group in Baltimore, Delaware area, there was I can't remember who the governor was at that time in Virginia, but very anti-gun, and there was going to be a huge gun rights rally around January-ish of 2019. I think I got it right, 19. And then, I think that's right. Either way, it's 19 or 20. But their idea was, they've already gone out. One of them's gone out and bought, he had a 6.5 Creedmoor. He did have a job, which was rare for most of the people in the group. 6.5 Creedmoor, and bought a $6,000 thermal scope. I mean, you can Bluetooth this thing, you can do all kinds of stuff. And the idea is it would help level the playing field for him to take out other people at nighttime because he wasn't as good of a sniper as others. But again, Baltimore FBI had a wiretap going, and these two guys and the stuff that they would talk about in their apartment, you would be just shocked. And it's out there. It's out there. It's been released by Canadian broadcast. It was, it's, I mean, they're talking about like, hey, we'll go shoot a cop. Let the cop pull somebody over. We can take that cop out with a sniper rifle, go down there, because after we kill the cop, what are you going to get? You're going to get bullets. You're going to get some more weapons. You're going to get bulletproof vests. And we'll just keep doing that. Almost like the Sniper case, like driving around D.C. and shooting out a trunk. And that's what we started uncovering. And there were some other crimes like tagging or defacing synagogues and stuff like that. But this group really, and the last couple I was in, a lot of people think white supremacy, they think anti-black. Man, these people they hate Jewish people.
Really?
Hate them. And I'm just like, but it goes back to the whole Hitler thing, you know, anyway. So one of the things that was always brought up and is interesting about the base case is we did do a Halloween training, and we were out there training, and they went and stole a goat or a ram. I've asked owners of goats and rams. It had ram horns. I think the size is the difference. I don't know. But either way, they stole it. And I'd already taught some hand-to-hand combat stuff that day for training. And I dozed off in my truck. And I get window banging. Pale horse, you got to get up. You got to get up. We got this goat. And I'm like, what do you mean you got a goat? I'm like, oh, man, where did y'all take this thing? They stole it. So we go down in this long walk in the woods, but I'd already been down there several times, so it didn't freak me out. The first time I walked down there, Ed, I was like, am I getting butterflies right now? I'm like, this is kind of spooky. So the long and short of it is they sacrificed the goat at a pagan blot to start the wild hunt. In Norse mythology, the wild hunt was Odin and other gods going out and just tearing up and wiping out their enemies, right? Well, their idea of the wild hunt was we're going to start doing the same thing, but it's going to be wiping the world of non-whites and Jewish, right? And we're sacrificing this goat, which, by the way, is a love offering. and it needs to be. There needs to be no negativity because this goat needs to know it's loved, or ram know it's loved because it's going to Odin, and we will see it again in Valhalla or whatever we're talking about. Don't get me wrong. I mean, my whole arm's Viking kind of stuff, you know. But so he goes to chop the head of it off, and I guess the back strap of the goat, the machete didn't even break a hair on it, man. He comes down, conk, and you're like, oh no. And I'm holding the back of the goat, and did that split second in your mind, you're going, this is going to be so bloody and nasty. Oh. But one guy had a gun. They ended up shooting the goat in the head, cut the goat's throat, fill a chalice or glass full of blood, and then we're walking around, and a lot of them did acid. Of course I didn't, but went around and they would do the drop of acid and then drink the blood. So by the time the glass got to me, it was already clotting. And this is where the Rolling Stones article got it wrong. It says, I said, screw that. No, I drank. I didn't turn it up because it was already getting chunky, but I put my finger in there and drank it. But I say all that because a lot of people are freaked out about that. But that was a hate camp because 2 days later, after everybody doing acid killed the second day of training. But on the third day, we're doing all these propaganda videos. And remember me talking to you about radicalization of teens online, or radicalizing anybody. They do these propaganda videos, and the only rule was the next video has to be better than the last one. And we're doing all that. We held a bonfire. We burnt holy Bibles. We burnt American flags, you know, F your Jewish God, all this stuff. And then you talk about being different than what you believe.
Of course, yeah.
You know, I will say that the Bibles didn't burn. That was pretty amazing to me. You can say what you want. People are like, well, the paper's made out of sand. It doesn't burn. So I said, I watched everything burn. The cover was burnt, but it flipped open in the pages, and it to the point to where one guy said, these fucking Bibles just won't burn, you know? But after all of that, that's when I gained more trust, and that's when they started bringing me in on these murder things. So what happens is we're now, it's almost like a master of puppets thing because you got so many FBI field offices investigating people in their own jurisdictions that are members of the base. And we're like, can we, because if we take this one off, it's going to burn this one and vice versa. You just, you know, so it just, you know, what you want to believe, you know, divine intervention or whatever you want to believe, or just luck. Everything came together and we were able to, I think it started with me on a Friday. I flew to Baltimore, met the case team, drove up to Delaware, trained with those guys all day, sighting in weapons, talking about if we were actually going to go down the following week to the gun rights rally, because their idea is to pop a few rounds because you would pretend like you're a 3%er and all the cops will be there and there's going to be all these people and it's going to be a powder keg waiting to go off. And they were all like, what if this is the boogaloo? What if this is the set off to the boogaloo? How bad would you feel if you weren't there to make somebody bleed, kind of thing? I'd never forgive myself. This is where we're getting. And, you know, it goes to the whole guerrilla warfare, poison water supplies, derail trains, take down power systems, anything to create chaos. So we got that going, and the case team's like, we want to dot a couple of I's and cross a couple of T's. The AUSA is ready. The Assistant United States Attorney's ready. We just want to make sure about these things to seal it tight to get the arrest. So it's an airtight case. And I did that, and then that Saturday, I think I crashed about 3, 4 in the morning. I got up and drove back to the airport, flew to Atlanta, got delayed, rental car place closed, hauled butt up to Rome, Georgia, where the other crew was at, and we got everything tight on the last guy that wanted to be a part of the murders. And so that was Sunday. Yeah, so Sunday, I drove home. I got home probably like, I don't know, early morning hours, Monday, slept a little bit. Tuesday, I was back in Rome meeting a SWAT team that was going to do the hit. The big thing with Luke is he was on that 100-acre farm. So there's no real way to sneak onto it without neighbors and stuff knowing. So out of all the arrests that were going to happen, we were most concerned about that one, safety-wise. So I did some UC undercover work, and we got it to where I was going to be picking him up, going to lunch, and then my truck would have a problem and the SWAT team would hit us. And that's kind of how it all went down. So that Wednesday, we arrested the Georgia crew and kept it real quiet. Thursday morning, early hours, FBI Washington field office SWAT and FBI Baltimore SWAT hit all the other guys. And then it started trickling, and I'm just quiet because I'm in the main chat for the base on Wire. And now the affidavits are starting to come out, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, did you see this? TMB's been arrested. Wait a minute, Can't Go Back's been arrested. Punished Snake's been arrested." And Punished Snake was a Canadian who had absconded illegally into the United States because he got doxxed. You know what doxxed is, right? So he got outed. For the listeners that may not know, he got outed in media and everything in Canada for being a white supremacist. And he absconded illegally. There was a time where we were looking for him. We found him I went to a training down at the farm. We had no idea. We went down there, and I was like, there's an extra person under the awning. I walked up, and I go, oh, my gosh, it's the Canadian. So they got him, and then I'm sitting there, and it's Friday, and I'm watching all the chatter. Has anybody talked to Pale Horse, this, that, and the other, this, that, and the other? Well, here's the crazy thing about the base. The leader and creator of the base is named Ronaldo Nazzaro. Ronaldo Nazzaro is an American citizen who graduated from, it wasn't Purdue. Was it Villanova? I don't know. But he graduated from a pretty prominent school, was Army Intel, was contracted under the Department of Justice. I can't remember if it was FBI or whatever. Well, now he resides in Russia. And he created the base. He had some land in the Pacific Northwest, but, awful lot of money to say you're just translating English or teaching English, right? So, draw from that what you want. But he's the leader. And as I'm watching, right around 5 o'clock on Friday, I see, hey, how can we not know if there's a Fed in here? Blah, blah, blah. We've done this. Because every time a member would get doxxed in the base and get outed, the operational security got tighter. In other words, now I'm not just going to come meet you and talk to you face to face. I'm going to make you use racial slurs and see if you're uncomfortable using, things like that, to be vetted thoroughly. So right around that time, Roman comes on and he says, I don't know if we could ever, something to the effect of, I don't know anything we did could have outed him. He was one of our best members. And then I'm reading it, I'm going, oh, he knows it's me now, and he starts laying it out. And he said that I went to every training, which should have been maybe that should have been a red flag, but I didn't go to every one. He got that wrong. But anyway, you're sitting there watching it, and you're watching him reading it, and then boom, it says you've been removed by Roman. So I screenshotted that and sent it to all the teams and said I'm out. But there were members in there that went on to say things like, wait, you're telling me the Fed was the guy with the deep voice? And they're like, yeah. And they go, there was something really endearing about him. And then the other dude would be like, well, maybe that's why they picked him and stuff. So the thing is it's still out there because, of course, everybody wasn't arrested because everybody didn't commit a crime necessarily.
Right.
And hopefully we did our due diligence, and that scared a lot of people off to say, this is wrong. I'm not going to do this anymore. But a lot of people just change their moniker and they go right to this other website or Discord or it was 4chan, 8chan, 12chan, whatever they got now, Threema, all these things. But like you look at the mass shooter from New Zealand, Christchurch, New Zealand, he was posting live on, it was either 8chan, I think it was 8chan at that point. He's posting live, I'm getting ready to go do this. I'm going to blog it live, all the white supremacy stuff. So, it's still out there.
How big would you say it is currently in the United States?
I'm hesitant to throw a number because, like, even in the Rolling Stones article, which again, the journalist is now a friend of mine for life, but that's his verbiage. It was an interview. Million? I don't know about no daggum million. There's some think tanks in D.C. that said there's over 1 million white supremacists waiting to knock on your door, and I'm like, I ain't seen that, but I've seen thousands,
thousands,
and you could see, but this is just from my experience and where I was at, right, hopping, in different cases, but some cases might have hundreds of members and spewing all kinds of anti-Semitic hate. I would go to bed and I'd wake up 6 or so hours later, and I'm 2,000 posts behind. So for 5 months, I'm going through every post because I'm afraid that I'm going to miss something.
Right.
And I don't want anybody to get hurt because of something I did wrong, right? But after 5 months of reading nothing but posts, thousands and thousands of posts, I'm like, okay, we got to stop because I can't. I mean, they're not doing anything bad, but I don't know. I mean, hundreds to thousands maybe, but then again, are you just on the outskirts and just spewing hate, or are you actually diving in and you're going to be one of those lone wolves?
Yeah.
You know.
I think we see that. I've always been curious because right now I think the media makes it seem like there's a lot of white supremacists.
Well, they're also tying that militia stuff in there, right?
Right.
So you can go to other things for militia stuff too, Telegram, this, that, and the other. And there's recruitment videos and stuff for, anti-government, showing you pictures of China and this, that, and the other. And I think they're tying them all together.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. But, at least in the circles that I run, if there was a white supremacist that was like hateful, we'd be like, get out.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that they tie, that to just the regular folk because, none of us are into that.
No.
There's no way. On the base story, when it came out in Rolling Stone, what was the reaction from the FBI?
Some was good, some was not so good. Again, the FBI has an FBI pre-publication unit. It's a pre-publication review office. And I'll just say that a lot of us we didn't know what all you're supposed to put through them. We briefed the article up for 3 months. And I guess it didn't go to the right people. So there was a little bit of a snafu there. I actually had an award taken from me, but it's okay.
What was the award supposed to be?
It was the FBI Director's Award.
Oh, man.
For that case, yeah.
Oh, man.
But before the article came out, I was told I was getting it, and I was pretty proud because that's one I'd never gotten. And then in 48 hours, I was told that it was being pulled from me, and the article hadn't even been out. And I get it. I get a knee-jerk reaction and stuff because you don't know if there's anything classified or if I'm burning somebody. But I did my due diligence with the other undercovers that were on the cases that I were on. And I'm like, look, I'm retired. I'm coming out. Are you okay with me showing my face? Or you're not okay with me showing my face? Because at first I was like, I want to show my face. And then I was like, no, I'm not going to show my face. And then I'm like, well, if you see my tattoos, that's still... And then I started thinking of one of my mentors, Jack Garcia, who was basically a full-time undercover almost his entire career for the FBI. Did a lot of mafia type stuff. Big Cuban guy, Big Jack. And I remember his book coming out, and he was doing the typical interviews where it's the silhouette, you can't see his face, and it's the robotic voice or whatever, the voice box thing on it. And after about 2 months, he's like, screw this. He was on 60 Minutes and said, look, I'm Joaquin Garcia. Everybody calls me Jack. I'm not a bad guy. I'm retired. This is my stuff. So the article, though, it did great things. And I like the article, but I never got to see the article before it came out. As journalists, Rolling Stone, they'd read it to me, but at 12,000 words, I start nodding off and stuff. So there were some things in there that I think could have been a little better, but again, it was an interview. I thought it painted the FBI in a positive light, which is big for me. I could be a basher. I could probably even be maybe a whistleblower, but I'm not trying to tarnish the badge. One bad incident like George Floyd, that tarnished a ton of badges for cops who were good cops, and that was an atrocious thing that happened. But I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to paint a positive light and maybe say some good things.
Yeah. Do you worry about being public, like for your safety, because people know who you are?
I get asked that a good bit, and for me personally, it's not me I'm worried about, but family and stuff. I don't want my family to be scared, and they are, and they get scared. But in the criminal system, this is where a lot of people may not understand. When we arrest somebody in the United States, we build a case and we arrest you. At some point, we have to turn over what's called discovery, which is pretty soon after the arrest. So that means that if it's federal, it's the Assistant United States Attorney through the United States Attorney's Office. We hand over everything that we did to build that case. I don't care if it's me and you sitting there and I'm taking notes. Those notes should have been put in what we call a 1A and put in the file, and it's all released. So the bottom line is this. At some point, the defendant is going to be sitting with their attorney, and they're going to get the discovery, and they're going to know that I was the undercover. They're going to know it. They may not know my full name, but they know that I was the undercover. So I'm burnt at that point as far as that case goes. I did one in a rural county in Tennessee. I could never go back there. The Outlaws, I could never go back to the Outlaws. I've been asked to do a biker club, and I'd be like, hey, who are they affiliated with? Well, they're affiliated with the Outlaws. Nope, can't do it because it would be one regional run. Because I traveled up and down the East Coast and out to Sturgis. And I'm like, it just one big meet, and somebody could see me and go, hey, that guy's a Fed, So I was blessed in those aspects being covered while I was out there. My wife helped me come up with the terminology is I wasn't necessarily undercover. I was under his cover.
There you go.
So, and hers too. But, it's, I said it this way. I'm not trying to sound cocky. I don't live in fear. I don't walk around living in fear walking on eggshells, scared, but I don't close my eyes either. I don't turn a blind eye, I will say for the most part, the friendships or relationships that I built on undercovers, a lot of them we still like each other afterwards. Again, back to Bugs Bunny. Remember the sheepdog and the coyote? They fight all day at work and then they clock out and it's like, hey, I'll see you tomorrow, Sam. That kind of thing. I've actually been drunk dialed by people that I put in jail because I would leave my undercover phones on, whatever I had for that case. I wouldn't just shut it off. I'd leave it on for a good couple of months. Never know if you're going to get threatened or whatever. I'd get, hey, Scott, this is your boy. I love you, man. I just want you to know I know you're doing your job, So, but yeah, that's just something you got to deal with. And there are going to be haters out there. When this thing started with the Rolling Stones magazine, you find out people that you may have thought were your friends or whatever, they're saying things and it hurts. At least it hurt me. Yeah. And I'd be good for a couple of days and I'd be sick in my stomach. And then I'd be good for a couple of days and I'd be sick in my stomach. And then at the end, I'm like, wait a minute. I'm a good guy. I don't know what you want me to do. And you just cross the threshold to where you're like, it's not that I don't really care what you think, but I don't really care what you think. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I've always been a boisterous guy. Somebody like before the Rolling Stones article was about to come out, they were like, in their opinion, and they were an acquaintance. I won't call them a friend because brothers don't do what some people do. They're not your brother or sister. But it was like, what you need to do is you need to lay low in the tall grass. You need to wait several years. Well, how many years is long enough? And I said, I appreciate your concern for me. But we've known each other for about 15 years, and we have drank a lot together, and we put on a lot of schools together. Not once have you ever asked me about my family. So it's okay. I hear what you're saying, but you do you, and I'm going to do me. I don't know how to do that. I'm a musician and a singer. I'm playing in front of 1,000 people at 3 or 4 services at church and stuff. So that's just me. I go out and I speak and I teach, and some people will say, you just like talking about yourself. Well, that just lets me know you don't really know me. Right. And by the way, this is something else culturally. Why is it so hard, especially in groups like military groups, and why is it so hard for somebody to just say congratulations? Right. Why is it so hard? Yeah. It's not a competition.
Well, I've noticed it with some of my military friends that are, I'm not going to say higher profile, but, you kind of watch the competition. Yeah. And it's like, I've actually thought about it a lot. Like, I wonder what causes that. I guess the egos can be so high that, instead of just being happy for.
It gets toxic. I've been on squads where we're all good friends now, but there were times under certain management that the squad that was so good became so toxic. And nobody, like, you get an award. Oh, well, you just got it because of this. Oh, I found out why you got that award because the person on your case team sits on the board for the thing. Like, come on. Well, thanks for doing some, whatever. Why can't you just say congratulations? I've had people that I did not like. And I tried to like them and I did not like them, but they did good on the squad. And I'd go over it and they'd be like looking at you shocked, like you're coming up after the briefing. I go, dude, this is one hell of a case.
Yeah.
I mean, this is awesome. And they're like, yeah, isn't it? There's no hard feelings. And if you want to go tactics, I'll put it another way. Tactically, I may love you to death. You may be the godfather of my children. You may be my blood brother, whatever, best friend ever. If you're not tactically sound, I don't want you making that entry with me.
Right.
On the other hand, you could be somebody I can't stand. I don't even want to have lunch with you. I don't want to have a beer with you, but you're tactically sound. Well, then I want you going in. It's not subjective.
Right.
It's subjective, right? You can't, it can get toxic like that, but sometimes that hurts, but, I don't know if I got to pay money for this, but it come across my mind. I'm like, Taylor Swift song. I'm like, haters are going to hate. I'm just going to shake it off.
Right. Exactly. What's the impact of your family through this? Like, how did your family help you get through 23 years in the FBI?
Well, probably solely second to God, right? For me. But it just brought up something in my head. When things are good, you kind of forget when things were rough. And when we were doing this book, everybody, I can write a great 302, which is a report for the FBI. It's going to be articulate. It's going to be the facts. That's nothing nobody wants to read. It reads like a report, right? But people want to hear the turmoil. They want to, that's good reading and that's good lesson learning. Well, me and my wife, at one point we were like looking at each other going, man, we've got to dive back into the bad times. We don't want to, but even going through that for the book, I learned things that I didn't know. Like during those 3 years, or when I'm running 50 million ways, I was a ghost at home. I would arrive home and I would be so beat because not only was I undercover on 2 different cases, I was the primary relief supervisor for the squad, which means if the boss is gone, you're running the squad. I was on SWAT. I ran all the tactical training and firearms training for McAllen. So, it would be a full month of just swamped with hardly any days off. And I would come home and just crash with my children at that point, little, but.
How many kids do you have?
2.
2, okay.
And then, unless you want to start counting dogs, because they're kids too.
Yeah, that's right.
Or older parents, which is kind of like having a kid.
That's right, become the parent again.
But yeah, it hurts because I look back and you're like, man, but I am a workaholic. I get it naturally. I'm goal oriented. But we kind of came up with a model because I said, look, it's God first, family second. I said, if you call me and I'm like, yeah, and I go to get, if you just break that thought process and say, Scott, I need you. Now I know. Because at that point, the job's not more important than the family.
Right.
But you get wrapped up in your goals and getting all this stuff done and doing good work.
Yeah.
But it is not an easy balance, and I didn't do great at it. I don't think I did as terrible as some, but again, it's not a competition, right? But my wife is a saint for sure.
That's awesome.
For somebody, so I get these calls now, you're retired, and they're like, hey man, what are you up to? And I go, well, I'm trying to pay my wife back for all the shit she put up with for 28 years, So how's that working? Sometimes I do good, sometimes not so good.
Yeah.
But
would you say the position that you're in now, though, it was all built up and worth it?
Yeah, I don't regret a lot.
Yeah.
I don't regret a lot. For instance, I got PTSD. And I'm big on mental health, especially in the law enforcement world. And the same thing for military. What are we number one for? You know what law enforcement military is number one for? Divorce, suicide, alcoholism, which can tie in pills and everything else you shove down your throat these days. And who wants to sign up for that, right? I'm number one. Woo!
Yeah.
Go out with a bang. But I'm big on that, and I've taken some of the blocks that I've taught over the years, and I've twisted it more towards mental health because, as I mentioned earlier, I did meet my threshold. I'd gone too long. I applied the warrior mentality to everything. I wasn't taking days off because I didn't want management bitching because I was gone. I was burning the candle at both ends till I ran out of wax. I'm not saying I'm better than anybody else by any means.
Right.
There are some that can make it way farther than I did. I do think it ebbs and flows. It's kind of like working out. Sometimes your threshold can be crossed pretty early, but I forget where I was going.
No, what would you were talking about mental health and you know, kind of how it is. I was going to ask you with what you remember what you're going to say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I was going to say I had PTSD. You asked me basically a question about do I regret, kind of.
Yes.
Not asking me if I regret, but it's how I was thinking. I thought one day, I'm like, man, if this wouldn't have happened, if those back surgery complications wouldn't have happened, and for 3 weeks I wouldn't have been through living hell, and all these doctors didn't know what's going on, I wouldn't have PTSD. One thing, and I would have never had to suffer any of that. And then I'm telling you, Ed, within 30 seconds, I said, but if I didn't have that, when I crashed, Joe Pistone wouldn't have been calling me, the Donnie Brasco, other mentors, Steve Salman, whatever, Mike Solari, all these guys wouldn't have been calling me and saying Country is my nickname, Big Country. I'm more medium now, but I was bigger then. But they'd be like, hey, Big Country, you all right? And I'm like, yeah, man, I'm doing okay. They told me, they're the ones that told me, take care of yourself, take care of your family. But as soon as you can, put pen to paper about everything you've learned in this whole thing, because that's how we get our best blocks of instruction, and that's how you pay it forward. And they were 100% right. So without me going through those bad things, I would have never created those blocks of instruction and met thousands upon thousands of people. So I'm not a guy that really looks back and says, man, I'd change a whole bunch. You know, could I have done better? Yeah. But I also believe everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, same, man. I look at like where we're at in life, like for the business side, is as in like God had a plan. He literally didn't let us get too big too soon because we weren't ready for it.
Right.
And the timing has always been perfect, even when at the time it didn't make sense, and you know, we might go bankrupt, or we might, you know, and so same. It's like those tough times. They kind of mold you.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. And again, kind of through the undercover work, you know, in the Outlaws, I was in for 1.5 years, and then they brought me down into it's more like a cellar, but into the basement of the clubhouse and stripped me at gunpoint looking for a wire after 1.5 years. But the reason they did it is because we upped the ante about doing this big dope deal. If I didn't have a wire on me, it wouldn't have been a big deal. I'd have taken my clothes off, fine, let's go. I was wired to the hilt, and they missed it by that much. So I learned from that.
How did they miss it?
It's just...
if you could say, if you can't.
Well, you know, even for the book, I'll just say, hey, it was, I don't think I said what part of clothing it was. I just said, hey, it was on my person. But I will tell you that I was pretty anal about the thing they wanted to put on me to record video.
Yeah.
Because the first couple of iterations were not okay with me. Because I'm like, I don't feel comfortable in it. It doesn't matter if you think it's where they're not. I'm the one going through the door.
Yeah.
If I'm not comfortable with it, I'm not going to do it. And I think it ended up saving me that night.
Wow.
So I don't know if I'd have gotten my butt kicked. I don't know if they would have shot me. I don't know. But yeah. But I learned from that.
Yeah.
And that molds you to become stronger as an undercover, not just anything else.
Because you got everything on the line there. And we got about 7 minutes. I'll have 3 minutes before my attorney call.
No good.
But your mindset while you're being stripped naked and searched, like how do you keep I was like, back to the very beginning of the interview, like how do you keep your composure?
I was scared shitless.
Yeah.
So if you talk to a lot of tactical trainers, we always say, hey, you bleed on the range so you don't die in the street. So some people call it muscle memory. I got a pet peeve with that because I don't think my bicep has a brain. But if I train, or we train on getting shot at, getting off the X, I can show you video after video of cops, probably even military, but mine are more law enforcement, that got in a shooting. They have no idea how many rounds they shot. They have no idea that they took effective cover when they did a magazine exchange. They have no idea that they got off the X because they trained so it became instinctive. So even though you're having that oh shit moment, that adrenaline dump, where your eyes, you get audio exclusion, auditory exclusion. So your ears are going, whoa, whoa, any traumatic incident. I mean, I remember being in my first car wreck. It was slow motion, right? You know, time dilation. Your eyes are going click, click. You can feel your heart beating. It feels like it's 5 minutes and it's only 30 seconds, you know? But in the undercover world, you don't necessarily get to do that unless you go back to the school and you role play, or you go out with a group of undercovers and you just start working it and you do a bunch of what ifs. What happened in that oh shit moment, because I definitely had it, is I forgot my middle name, but I didn't realize I did a distraction technique. I'm saying all these things. Now I'm also listening and I'm going, oh, they're going to run me on who'sarat.com. They're going to run me. They're going to Google me. Okay. I'm also looking at my friend, like probably the second closest relationship I had out of the 2-year case. He's the one, he's the enforcer. He's the one having to strip me.
Oh, man.
And I'm looking into his eyes and I'm not saying it out loud, but I'm basically, my face is saying, am I going to be all right? And his face back to me was kind of, you're going to be all right. But then he ends up grabbing the piece of clothing and looks pretty much right where the equipment was at. And you can hear me in the background going, and I don't even know I'm doing it, right? But it's one of those things where I think it may appeared that I was cool. I wasn't cool.
Yeah.
But it was just that the training came in.
Wow. Yeah. You think he saw it maybe and just, no, he didn't for sure.
They didn't.
Yeah. That's wild, man. I mean, it's got you think you have PTSD from those type of instances?
No, not necessarily. Mine was back surgery complications that put me down for 3 weeks, and basically I felt like I couldn't breathe. I would eat this much food, and I felt like I was suffocating. And after 3 weeks, we figured out what it was, but by that time, the damage was done.
I see.
So fast forward 5-7 years later, I'm in the outlaw case. Been out drinking all night. You wake up, you can hear the whiskey and eggs swishing in your belly, you know. And I started doing like a P90X workout. I came up, I was down in Florida, and I came up for air and it wasn't there. And my mind reverted back to 2002, to the PTSD, you know, or to that traumatic incident. And yeah, that was mine, just the breathing stuff.
You had mentioned mental health for police officers and military, and let's kind of close it with this. What would you say to somebody like that has gone through something traumatic?
Talk to somebody. Absolutely talk to somebody. I'll give you my number. My phone rings 24/7, and that's no bullshit. I do have the notification sounds off from like, I don't know, whatever, 10:30 to 8.
Right.
But it rings anytime you want, or find somebody. I get the stereotypical, you might not want to talk to your psychologist at your department because it could leak out. It may affect, even though they say it's not supposed to, it does happen. But find somebody. There's somebody there. Find you a Christian counselor. Find you a buddy. You're not the only one going through it. There are tools you can put in your toolbox to help. It doesn't mean you're a wimp, because I mean, I said, look, man, if you know anything about construction, what if I just gave you a hammer and a screwdriver and said, build that house? Well, that's going to be pretty damn tough. But if I fill your truck up with tools to build that house with, it's just more tools. And other people have gone through it, and you can get it. And again, you might go talk to somebody and they might be terrible. Well, I'm going to use one from my pastor. He talked about getting burned at church. Here's what he said. You ever had food poisoning? Everybody raised their hand. He said, did you quit eating?
Right, exactly. That's a good point.
So go find you another therapist, you know. But don't hold it in. Don't, listen. Not in arguments, but in discussions with people who don't know law enforcement. I said, do you know how often it is you show up in uniform and everybody's happy to see you? Because it's rare. It's rare. Maybe a car wreck where somebody needs to be pulled out or something. But when you walk into somebody's home or you stop somebody, it's kind of rare. So, and you start getting spit at and you start getting treated like trash, and you take that home and you keep it. And then you let it affect your family. And then when you go out with your family, you look at somebody that looks similar to what you've been dealing with, and you're already generalizing them. Then break away. Let it go, you know? Talk to somebody.
Absolutely. Anything you'd like to say kind of in closing?
Love.
Yeah, man. Well, it is the answer.
Yeah. I've been blessed. I've been blessed as a case agent. I've been blessed as a undercover. I've been blessed as an instructor and speaker. I just appreciate the time, man. You know, I've already said my piece about there's women and men out there that have done way more than me. And that's a huge thing to me, because even if they don't want to talk about it, that's fine. But I'm just trying to do good, you know? Absolutely. Well, Scott, thanks for coming all the way from Knoxville. You're
your career is amazing. Thanks for doing what you've done for our country too. Taking dangerous people that want to kill others and harm others, off the streets, and doing God's work in many ways. It's if you haven't been told thank you recently, thank you for what you do.
I consider it an honor.
I'm grateful, man.
And I'll say one last thing. This is how I start conversations with some of the people I've had to from Hollywood and stuff. I go, before we start, I just want you to have this mindset. There are evil people on this planet that want to do evil things to good people. Not everybody, but there are those. So just keep that in mind.
Remember that. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, buddy.